What is to follow is a celebration of the woman, the evolution biologist, the scholar, the futurist, the colleague and friend to many of us, Elisabet Sahtouris, born January 23rd, 1936, and passed, got her wings on December 2024. To follow is a celebration by the Evolutionary Leader Circle. I am the host. Other of Elisabet's close friends happily joined in, with many speaking after a prayer and a blessing in the shamanic tradition, which was so close to Elisabet's nature and heart. Following that are a few other clips by Kit Thomas, myself doing an interview with Elisabet, and Roger Epstein, who is with Elisabet and caretaking for her to the very end. I hope you enjoy. Would have been good to get my bad joke to start with because
I think the
Elisabet loved my
recording was
bad
on.
jokes.
Yeah, somebody's recording it.
It was being recorded.
And recorded. It said recording is in progress. We
Okay, excellent.
so
Excellent.
somebody
And Deborah, you and I are all set up with the co-hosting and all that?
You are co-host, and
Good.
perhaps later you'll be host.
Okay, good, good, good. Well, welcome everyone. Just to start, it's just a pleasure to see you all for what really is a celebration of a friend of ours' life who was so remarkable and so beautiful. And we all knew her in our own ways over the course of time. And it's really an honor to have put this together. And Deborah has been awesomely helpful to me in arranging all of this. And it's a blessing that we're able to all get together to honor our dear friend Elisabet Sahtouris. So to really start all of this off, and we do have a number of speakers who will be coming on, and that is fantastic. And after an initial raft of speakers that we discussed in advance, it'll be opened up to everybody, so everybody can weigh in. And Kristen Hoffman will be joining us, and Gary Malkin's supposed to be joining us for some musical reprieve. And Deborah's going to be doing a very interesting meditation with us all as well. And Oscar is going to open up with a blessing and a prayer. So on that note, Oscar, hola y bienvenidos.
Texemuyu taitanchi huiracocha pachacamac. Kai pachiwaiku, kai kintuta, kai despachuta, hampui, ñocaiko ujumang, yanantin kai pacawaj, yari, hanak pachamanta saiwa, hampui. Welcome into the collective heart of humankind, which our beloved Elisabet Sahtouris was so keen of reminding us is the home of our species-wide celebration as evolutionary cohorts within creation's dancing ways, in which the diversity and beauty and sanctification of our great cosmic mother's purpose, teleology, and actual joy for the great originating mysteries, ways of manifesting in the infinitude of her plurality becomes present within our own creative genius and agency as two-leggeds upon planet. These are words spoken in English, yet in Spanish and in Quechua, or Runasimi, the mouth of the people, are best honored as a homage to our sister who is now in the starlight from whence we have all originated. So behind you, you see an altar mayor. It is a ceremonial altar ground, a temple space, that it's comprised of the three pachas, the three worlds that Elisabet was very familiar with, having spent much time in the Andes, from whence I am originated, as well as the three campos, or three fields of power, of shamanic power, the field of gain, the field of balance, and the field of justice, or the field of the magician, the field of the medicine person, and the field of the mystic, all of which she embodied so beautifully. So I'm going to ask you to participate in a little honoring ceremony, and it involves opening up your hearts and letting go of your bodies. So I invite you to close your eyes, bring your awareness to your breath, and allow your breath to be a portal, a gateway, an access point to empty fullness, to the teksemuyu, to this shunyata. To that place that is all places and simultaneously empty spaces. That liminal in-between realm. And receive these words in the mouth of the people. Nyokani kanchis kamaska kani Elisabet Sahtouris. Kamaska Wilka Kawak. Hiari Siwar Kenti Puhyay Kausay Hanak Pachamanda Saiwa Kanchaymanta Hampuy Hampuy Kusikanchay Iya Munay Kausay Munay Hampuy Hampuy Yari Hinaya. Now gently open your eyes and kindly gaze into the area where this photograph of Elisabeth has been placed in the altar. In the area what is known as the Hanakpacha, or the celestial Empyrean realms. Which is known as the superior or celestial realm. And a flame is lit now above it. Now I ask you all to direct your left palm toward that flame and direct your right palm toward the flame and place your left palm over your heart, your Hatun Songku. And access, touch into the deepest, most unlimited, loving expression of your relationship with Elisabeth, your story, your imaginal animacy that characterized your experience of lived relationality with this extraordinary soul that has graced our lives. And send that love toward that transmutational flame and listen. Listen deeply. The Cosmic Dance of Elisabet Sahtouris, a mythopoeic homage. Upon the shimmering tapestry of existence, where cosmic threads weave stars and souls alike, a luminous being emerged, Elisabet Sahtouris. Her wisdom, like a guiding beacon, illuminated life's complexities, bridging the ancient and modern, the scientific and the sacred. Her teachings, timeless and enduring, continue to resonate in the hearts and minds of those who seek truth and understanding. In the primordial hush, the cosmos birthed spirals of galaxies and the seed of life, which Gaia cradled in forests, oceans, and dreaming minds. From those arose a singular soul endowed with deep seeing that read the universe's secret script in ammonite shells, birds in flight, murmuring rivers, and unfolding butterfly wings. Elisabet walked Earth as a seer and scientist, forever listening to the universe's song. She revealed the Earth Dance, a cosmic spiral of endless becoming, urging humanity to shed old forms, dissolve illusions, and emerge anew, like the butterfly rising from its chrysalis. Her message of transformation is a beacon of hope, inspiring us to embrace change and grow into our full potential. Wandering as a pilgrim of wisdom, she carried the sacred codes of life's unfolding. Tribal elders recognized in her a kindred soul who spoke the language of wind and stone, while visionaries hailed her as a bridge between worlds, discerning nature's patterns in swirling galaxies and human civilizations alike. When her earthly vessel grew weary, she offered one final gift, quotes, "Ground the cosmic love down to your toes," unquotes, reminding us that Earth is ever a sacred school of becoming. Then she stepped beyond the veil, returning to the universe's luminous fabric. Yet she remains a whisper on the wind, a glint in a child's eye, a golden note in birdsong. Praise, blessed be Elisabet, a radiant guide of evolution's tide. The stars remember you, the earth sings your name, and we who remain on this spinning sphere carry your light until we meet again in the great cosmic dance. Fly well, dear one. Hi! Exhale all the air from your lungs, please. And hold on the exhalation. Scooping up with your right hand the flame, bringing it over to your left hand in your heart. Inhaling, filling your lungs to capacity, retaining your breath. Hold the breath. And on the count of three, softly offer it into this libation. 1, 2, 3. Blow forth. En nombre de todos ellos, ancestros y ancestras, de este linaje camajero, ofrecemos esta chaguita de agüitas aromáticas de las huaringas en reconocimiento de esta querida hermana citada de nombre y reconocida como alma y guía en la vida de todos ellos aquí presentes, caminantes del Paco Guacho. Que así sea y así será. On wings of condor, to Mijanapacha and beyond, may your journey be of bliss, of love, of light, and of sacred relationship. Beloved Elizabeth, we carry with you our love. Thank you all for allowing this brief honoring in the way of my people to our community. Love you all.
Te amo. Thank you so much, Oscar. Gracias por todo. What a perfect way to begin our celebration today of our dear Elisabet. We just reached down into the level of soul through your prayer and your blessing. So, muchas gracias, amigo. We're going to move through a few of the speakers that I've been in contact with over the past period of time and in preparation for today. And Deepak just contacted me recently, just this morning, so I could find out that he would be available to join us. So if he is around, then please join us, Deepak, if you would, for sharing with us a little bit about Elisabet. I know you've been friends for a long time, and it'll be beautiful to hear from you.
Thank you, Mitchell. Actually, although I knew Elisabet as an evolutionary biologist and a futurist and a consultant to governments and businesses and other organizations, I was first introduced to her by my friend Rinaldo Brutoco, who's right here. And that's when I came to know her as a person. And after that, it was through the graciousness of Deborah Moldo, who's here, and Dan Williams, that I maintained a degree of contact with her. I met her in Europe several times, in Hawaii at a few conferences. And now I regret that my contact was not as frequent as it could have been. She shifted my perspective from mechanistic science to a consciousness-based evolutionary understanding of not only biology, but of the cosmos. So I feel deeply grateful, not only to Elisabet, but to Rinaldo and Dan Williams and Deborah Moldo for continuing my association with her, little that it was, or not enough. My last contact with her was in Europe when I was at a conference, and we spent actually 2 very meaningful days discussing the nature of fundamental reality and the little role that we all could play in bringing us closer to what we might call truth. So I see many familiar faces here, and I feel gratitude to all of you because each one of us here is a piece of the puzzle. And in some way or another, uh, I hope in these times of chaos, we will see the emergence of order. In this time of chaos, we will move to fundamental creativity, but also to a life of joy, connection to the deepest truth inside us, compassion, and love. So that's my very short message and gratitude to all of you. I see Kurt Johnson here, who's always reminding me of the path we need to follow. Thank you, friends.
Thank you, Deepak. Deeply appreciate your taking the time to join us in this special event. So, with that said, another dear old friend of Elisabet's is Bruce Lipton, my dear friend, cellular biologist. He and Elisabet have been in dialogue for a long time, discussing matters of nature, biology, and everything else under the sun and beyond. So, Bruce, please share with us, would you please? And then we'll bring on your beautiful daughter, Jennifer, who has a wonderful tale to tell about Elisabet and her experience as well.
Thank you, Mitchell. I'm so glad to be here with everyone because uh, this is a relationship that I'd like to describe that started 40 years ago. I was at Stanford doing some research on what had not yet been understood called epigenetics, the scientific world. I was out there being weird about epigenetics, which was counter to the whole DNA story of life, which really talked about how environment and organisms conform and live together and evolve in harmony. And while at Stanford, and I started to talk about the idea of an evolution based without the DNA, everyone looked at me as a total weirdo. And there was no dialogue to be had because I was like a heretic of Darwinian theory. And so it was all to myself. And then one day someone said, would you mind picking up Elisabet at the airport in San Francisco and taking her to a center down near Santa Cruz? And I said, fine. I didn't really know who she was that well. She got in the car, and the world changed for me at that very moment. My work was so much tied with the cellular mechanisms of evolution, and Elisabet brought in the whole concept of environment, culture, social aspects, which were there, but I never connected. The conversation was so beautiful because both of us had threads of a tapestry. And for the first time, locked in that little car as we drove, we wove those threads into a spectacular understanding that we both shared the rest of our lives on the nature of the evolution that's going on. And she would be here today to say, yep, the chaos in the world that you're experiencing right now, yeah, we understood that 40 years ago when we were talking about it because the chaos is the most necessary step in breaking an old system to create a new system. And it was the most invigorating experience to find someone I could talk with that shared the same stuff. And it was like, I'm not the only guy out here doing this. And what she added to my story really fulfilled the background. And that background, which I'm just going to bring up right now, is to two things I wanted to say, which I didn't start with. And number one, Mitchell, I want to thank you because you are a humanitarian, a connector. I've known you for years and years, and your job is to connect the world of new awareness and new consciousness to create a giant community, which you have, a better world. I really love that. I want to also thank Oscar because Oscar connected us with the ground and the sky and brings in the full story that conventional biology doesn't want to talk about so much, but it's the real future that we're understanding. So Oscar's work is real important as a foundation for all of us to connect. Evolution is not just a physical thing on this planet, it's a spiritual evolution, and the two of them come together. And this is what linked Elisabet and I so from the very beginning, a heart to heart, soul to soul person. We could talk the same story. It was delightful. I didn't tell her how many wrong turns I made to prevent getting to the place too soon because I wanted to cover. I think I took an hour extra ride all around Santa Cruz saying I'm lost, but we'll get there, knowing damn well that it was an opportunity for me to expand and talk and see a better world. She was all about earth dance. She's a choreographer of earth dance. And she profoundly affected my life. What's so fun for me is to right now have my daughter Jennifer sitting next to me. The old story, the fruit doesn't fall very far from the tree. This piece of fruit right here, my daughter, is a professor of environmental geography. And just a short little background before I let her say, so I connected. Her research work was based on living with the Quechua Indians in the mountains of Peru and living and working with them and studying. And the whole point was this an accident of how she ended up creating her PhD work in Peru? And the answer is there are no accidents. And so I will let Dr. Jennifer, describe her connection with our dearest love, Elisabet.
Thanks, Dad. Thank you, everyone. Elisabet and I met because my dad obviously introduced us at a time when I had finished my undergraduate work at University of Wisconsin and then was working with migrant farm worker communities in Eastern Washington. And after that, I was looking for an experience of kind of working at a community level with people. And my dad knew that Elisabet had worked and been to Peru and had opportunities to be in Peru. And he said, here, I'll connect you up with Elisabet. And she had a project working outside of Cusco in the Sacred Valley. And so I saved up money and planned to just go and be there for a little while and connect with Elisabet. And she took me to Peru. And while we were in Peru together in Cusco, where I had an opportunity to first set some ideas into play for my own kind of perception. And that was Elisabet's true gift of being able to just open people's perceptions and minds, but letting them learn that from themselves and from their own standpoint and seeing that transform within their lives. And so I'm so grateful for Elisabet to have done that for me. So my time in Peru and Cusco was about 6 months, and I kind of started out in different communities and met some individuals in Chinchero and had the opportunity to meet with some of the shaman individuals that Oscar also was communicating about, that saw that beauty in Elisabet, who just gracefully walked through all worlds in a way that was so mentoring and beautiful. And I can still see that glint and sparkle in her eyes when I think about her, because she carried that with her everywhere. So I ended up staying for about 6 months, and then I went back to the States and I applied to get my master's and PhD, and ended up going to University of Texas at Austin and finished my PhD. And this was 30 years ago when Elisabet introduced me to the lands and the culture and the idea of thinking spiritually while invoking and having that science base. And so as a current professor, and that is really my blend. I work in cultural and environmental resources and environmental systems and try to carry that. And I've used, I think, pieces of Elisabet's work in different classes as a like kind of environmental way of viewing and seeing. And so, so yes, it is not chance that I happened to choose this weekend to come down to visit my dad, apparently. And so I'm here to honor Elisabet as well. And I'm thankful and very grateful for her beautiful spirit, and grateful for her to be here and to help guide us into a very complex future. So thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to say, not only that, Elisabet helped her how to learn how to cook guinea pigs.
Cooey.
Gooey.
How to eat and enjoy.
So she really had the real experience that Elisabet offered her to live among the Quechua, live with them in their house and spend all that time. And that's all because of Elisabet's guidance, leadership, connectivity with the world, and mission that she imparted to my daughter. So we're both very honored to have Elisabet help us guide us into the future that we see is very bright in spite of the very messy moment. But that's because you have to break it before you can build a new one.
Mm. Words of wisdom again, Bruce Lipton. And thank you so much for sharing, both of you. This was when I spoke with you last night, Bruce, and Jennifer was sitting right next to you. And you told me that you had been in Cusco and brought to Peru in a way through Elisabet. I went, oh my God, synchronicity abounds. This is amazing, you know. And in all the years I've known Bruce, I have not had a chance to meet you. So it was perfect,
Yes.
divine timing.
Thanks, Mitchell.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Oh boy. So we having fun yet? Elisabet would certainly want us to be. And I think we are, having gathered so many of her good friends together to talk and share among ourselves. One of her oldest friends of all time and longtime brother is Rinaldo Rutoko. And he got back to me so quickly when I sent out an announcement inviting him and a few others to please speak. So it's with great pleasure and honor that I would love Rinaldo to share some words with us. Please unmute yourself and join us.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello.
We do.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Mitchell. And thanks for going to the effort you and Deborah did to put this together. I think it's so appropriate. It's a great tribute to Elisabet, obviously, but it's also a tribute to everybody on the call because we all gained something in this network and we've all shared it in ways we may or may not have known of at the time. And bringing us all together in this last public honoring of Elisabet, I think what you're helping us to do is see where all those strands came from and the pattern that they wove that was the unique genius and personality of Elisabet, because she was not only very bright and very, very creative and unbelievably courageous, but she was and I don't use the word lightly, I think she was a bit of a Mahatma. She was a big soul. And in being that big soul, she walked the earth with tremendous amount of effectiveness up until even close to her last days and touched people in different ways. And I was really delighted to hear Deepak's comments about Elisabet because that was a great joy when they got to be associated. And it's also great joy to hear Bruce's story of Santa Cruz because that's the effect. My experience with Elisabet over more than 30 years now was that. And it happened over and over again. I pulled something that I thought would be useful to share with the group. In 2010, one of the articles we published of Elisabet's was called "Celebrating Crisis Towards a Culture of Cooperation." And what she was talking about is what Bruce just alluded to, that you have a systemic breakdown, usually preceding every major movement forward in biological systems. And she felt in social systems as well. And I urge you to take a look at that article for a couple of reasons. But one of them is that she talked in that article for the first time about economics as being a subset of this awareness of what the Hindu world would call Kali Yuga, okay, death and rebirth. And she wrote extensively in that about how we've gone through this before and how the species has been very creative in dealing with the challenge. Now, there's no assurance given that the species will survive this challenge. And these are very challenging times, to be sure. But I wanted to share that with you because she created, she died at 88, which I think is in Chinese a symbol of incredible affluence and basically all things good are at 88, right? I mean, double eights. What she says in this paper is that crisis should be seen as an opportunity. Economic reality has to be seen as a subset of natural systems. And that's what attracted me to her many years earlier, which is why we published this. So one thing I wanted to do today is I wanted to read you her approved biography that we've been running for decades on the Academy website. Listen to what she approved, having been said about herself. Elisabet Sahtouris, PhD, is an evolutionary biologist, futurist, author, speaker, and consultant on living systems design, showing the relevance of evolving biological systems to organizational design. She travels as a speaker in North, Central, and South America, Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. She makes television and radio appearances in addition to live speeches and workshops. Dr. Sahtouris is a citizen of the United States and of Greece. And by the way, the picture you picked, Mitchell, is definitely from the Greek period. That is Elizabeth's Greek period photograph.
Yeah. That's Deborah who did that.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Nice job. Thank you for bringing the Greek in. Very proud of that. So she a citizen of Greece, and she had a Canadian PhD. She did her postdoctoral work at the American Museum of Natural History in New York, taught at the University of Massachusetts and MIT, was a science writer for the Horizon Nova TV series. She was invited to China by the Chinese National Science Association. She organized Earth Celebrations 2000 in Athens, Greece, and has been a United States consultant on indigenous people. She is a participant in the Humanity 3000 dialogues at the Foundation for the Future, the Synthesis dialogues, and the Dalai Lama with the Dalai Lama in Dar es Salaam, and consults with corporation and government organizations in Australia, Brazil, the US, and I would add Japan. Dr. Sahtouris uses nature's principles and practice, revealed in biological evolution, as useful models for organizational change. She applies them in the corporate world, in global politics and economics, in our efforts to create sustainable health and well-being for humanity with the larger living systems of Earth. That's what she wanted us to know were her credentials for what she did. I think it's a brilliant summary. The only thing she left off, which I think we probably should have added, was that she was not only a fellow of the World Business Academy for 30 years, but a member of the World Wisdom Council. She basically spoke extensively at the World Bank, at the UN, even Boeing, Siemens, Hewlett Packard, South African Rand Bank, numerous people in Japan, the Co Roundtable, Tokyo International Forum, the governments of Australia, New Zealand, and Netherlands, Sao Paulo Business Schools, and the State of the World Forum. So Elisabeth was this incredibly well-credentialed human being who saw as a model the inevitability of the breakdown we were going through, but also had a belief that as a species, we could break through that breakdown. That optimism in the face of the knowledge she had of what system breakdown looked like is what really impresses me so much about Elisabeth. So in the many conversations we've had over the years, and we talk very frequently, several times a month, sometimes when she was hot on a topic, a couple times a week, and she was motivated by a quote I want to share with you that she picked for another article we published on her called The Biology of Globalization. And she decided to lead that article off with two observations about human civilization today. And the first one was by Sir James Goldsmith, who said in 1994, "What an astonishing thing it is to watch a civilization destroy itself because it is unable to re-examine the validity under totally new circumstances of a new economic ideology." Her sense of that economic ideology came from nature, from biology. And that was an amazing gift because it was a long time before we got the business community to understand that sort of symbiotic thinking was actually the breakthrough we needed in business if we were going to achieve social benefit over the long haul. The second quote, and the one she put right in front of the article, was this one by George Soros, quoting from the Atlantic Monthly in 1997. Although I have made a fortune in the financial markets, I now fear that the untrammeled intensification of laissez-faire capitalism and the spread of market values into all areas of life is endangering our open and democratic society. The main enemy of the open society, I believe, is no longer the communist, but the capitalist threat. And I share that with you for the prescience that was written in 1997 by Soros and quoted by Elisabet a number of years later. Why do I quote this? Because my joy in knowing Elisabet was helping to translate her and bridge her to the business community, which we did not always do successfully, she and I, for a whole bunch of good reasons. But over my head right now is the H2 Clipper, and I'm not going to go into it much except to say that was her last great scientific economic passion. She swore that she made me swear to her I would name one after her, which I will. What it's about was her commitment that we shared for a radically different economy based on non-fossil fuels, based on hydrogen, and the ability to move large quantities of hydrogen around the globe economically in a 100% green way. And so she became a big supporter and fan of a number of business things that I did over the years. And each time we would talk about how that business idea came out of some evolutionary principle. And so she would ground me and teach me how the bigger thoughts, the bigger cycles of life, which are in these papers I urge you to read, they're actually unavoidable awarenesses we will either learn at our leisure or learn in the most painful way, but they will dominate what happens to us. And we, since we have the unlimited capability to re-examine ourselves, to rebirth our consciousness, which is what she was trying to accomplish, and because we have the ability to adapt as a species, which she thought was profoundly unlimited, she believed we could, I do too, come through even these darkest hours. We will miss her light as we go through them. And I couldn't say I'm more happy for the contribution she made through all of us, with all of us, to all of us in the work we did. And I will miss her terribly. I already do. And I want to thank everybody who came today. Thank you particularly Mitchell, Deborah again for helping to organize this, and to her son who's taking over her website.
Ronaldo, thank you so much, my friend, for sharing with us. She was so enamored of you and all that you do and the H2 Clipper in the last phase, and spoke about you immensely during this last couple of years and the good work you're doing with it, and wanted us to get together. So we will and discuss it. I think she wanted me to fly on it as well. So.
I'm sure she does.
Thank you again, Ronaldo. Now, for something fresh and novel and wonderful, we have Reverend Deborah Moldau, who's going to share with us a really interesting meditation to bring us into, well, I'll just say greater contact. Deborah.
Thank you, Mitchell, and thank you so much for organizing this beautiful time together. It's so inspiring hearing what a light Elisabet was in everybody's life. And everybody that I talked to who knew Elisabet feels like they had a special friendship with her. It's just amazing. And I'm very grateful to Nancy Rivard, my dear friend who's on the call with us today, who introduced me to Elisabet at a UN event in San Francisco in 1995. And it's been just a joy having her in the evolutionary leaders community, along with so many of you, so that we could get to know her better and she could shine her light among us, and also make us laugh, which nobody's mentioned. But what a zest for life she had. Yeah. And we so appreciate everything about this remarkable woman. So what I would like to do before we hear from some more reflections from those of you who are on the call who were deeply touched by Elisabet is to see if we can make her present here. So let's take a few breaths together Close your eyes if you like. And go into a quiet place in your heart. And as we begin to settle in to that quiet place, let us reach our hearts to Elisabet. Picture her in our mind's eye. In whatever realms she is traveling at this time. See her. Feel her presence. Experience her lightness. Now that she is free, and in a couple of minutes of silence, I invite you to speak to Elisabet. Any words of gratitude or farewell or whatever you like. And listen. Listen to her and see if she might have a message for you or for us. So I'll be quiet now and let you do that. And finally, in this immense field of love that we are creating together, send her off with whatever blessing you would choose. You can open your eyes now, and I want to tell you that she said to me, "Don't send me off, I'm still here." I haven't gone anywhere. You can reach me anytime. So if you received a message from Elisabet that you would like to share with us, please put it in the chat so we can all enjoy your communication with Elisabet. Thank you all for being here today. And again, thank you so much, dear Mitchell, for organizing this so we could come together and bask in the light of Elisabet once again. Thank you.
Beautiful. My pleasure, Deb. And thank you again for being of such great help in putting this together. I so appreciate it. as well as this beautiful meditation that gave us a chance without intermediaries to be direct with Elisabet. And I think you're helping to demonstrate actually that our friends are near, whether they are in body or not. And it's another level of consciousness that Elisabet, as well as many of our friends, very deeply appreciate, that it's not the rigid boundary of one or, but both and. You know, we're all in this together and we will continue to be so. Deborah, thank you so much, my dear. So continuing with today's event and celebration of Elisabet Sahtouris, we have another dear old friend of hers from way back, my dear friend as well, Lynn Twist, the co-founder of Pachamama Alliance, the Soul of Money Institute, and, well, cannot possibly contain it in a brief little intro, but Lynn Twist, please come and chat with us a bit about you and Elisabet. If we can.
I, like all of you, loved,
there you are.
loved Elisabet Sahtouris. You couldn't not love her. I mean, she was just all heart. And then she had this amazing brain. And she was almost overeducated, you know. People with that kind of a brain that are so educated and then educated and even more and then educated even more and then educated even more usually get a little stuck in their head, but she just never, ever, ever got stuck there. Her brain was in her mind, and her training and her education and her brilliance was in service of her heart. She was the model human being. She was all love. And everything she said, everything she did, crossing so many worlds. And when you think about business and science and education and politics and governance and indigenous people and all the different issues, she worked on social justice and environmental sustainability and regeneration and climate and this and that. There's just nothing she didn't touch with her brilliance. But it was always motivated and sourced from her heart. And at the Pachamama Alliance, our work is so rooted in the wisdom of the earth and indigenous people. And she was such an ally for us. I think anyone with an organization or an institution or a family or in anything on this call and not on this call knows that Elisabet was an ally. And I think we use the word alliance at Pachamama Alliance very deliberately. Being an ally is such a powerful way to relate. It's validating, it's never judgmental, it's supportive, it affirms, it strengthens, and it doesn't rely on or become codependent. And for me, she was one of our greatest. She was born a grandmother, probably when she was like 5 years old. She had the wisdom of a grandmother. I think of her as the ultimate grandmother for life. And that the Pachamama Alliance now, we're really realizing that the evolutionary leap that at least we're naming, in many cases, this comes from all of the work that Elisabet proliferated around this world as an evolutionary biologist. But one could say that the work that we're all doing, everyone that I see, all the amazing, brilliant people, heartful people on the screen here, is catalyzing an evolutionary leap to transform the dominant paradigm of human supremacy into human responsibility and sacred reciprocity with the earth, each other, and the community of life. And indigenous people never went to human supremacy. They never went there. So they have been a guide for us at Pachamama Alliance, but so clearly for Elisabet. She wasn't a human supremacist, if I can put it that way. You know, the giant otter was her brother, the grandfather trees, the pekap trees were her grandparents. She was deeply steeped in the ultimate teaching from the natural world. No matter how many, PhDs kind of training she had, what she deeply listened to, kind of above and beyond anything else, were the messages from the earth, from the natural world, from the plants, from the animals, from all the species on this planet, and saw herself among them as an ally rather than in any way dominating them. And that is so rare in this world. And it is where we're headed, hopefully, that the hubris of human supremacy is almost calcified now and at an extreme, so that we can break it apart and find our rightful role in the flourishing of life. And she is one of the greatest models as a woman, for me, and I think for all of us. She was a grandmother the day she was born. And that energy, that uncompromising love, that unconditional love that we all count on from grandmother energy, she proliferated that her entire life. And I was honored and privileged to know her and to be touched by her, but more importantly, be shaped and transformed by any and every conversation or anything that I read, or anything I heard about her, or any touch I had with her life. I was humbled by it, humbled into being more true to myself. So she was the ultimate example of what it means to be human, and a model for our species. Hopefully, I'd like to say that that COVID was morning sickness for a species that's pregnant with a new kind of human being, and that we're in some sort of a birth canal, and the pain is pushing us until vision pulls us through this pain. And she's now on the other side, hopefully pulling us through the pain into the vision that we all will make real. So thank you, Mitch, and thank you all of you for being such allies for her, which is for sure being an ally for the flourishing of life. And I was honored to know her, and I feel like she, like some of our greatest heroes and heroines, their power is amplified when they're no longer working on this earth. When I think of Gandhi and Martin Luther King and Maya Angelou, she's of that league, and I think her power, now that she's freed of the human form, will be amplified, and may her teachings from the heart, backed by the science of the mind, empower all of us to do our best work at this critical time in history. So blessed friends, we were also blessed to know her, and may the blessing that we received from her be passed on to all future generations and all species, all children of all species for all time. Thank you.
Beautiful, Lynn. Thank you so much for sharing from your deep Pachamama wisdom all the way to all of us here today, and your kind of summation of Elisabet's nature, if you will, is so grand, and it's so true. She was one of the most intellectually powerful women many of us have ever met. And on the other hand, she was a woman of heart, of deep heart. And you could tell that her consciousness, her mind was guided by the even larger heart that she had. So thank you for articulating that as beautifully as you did. So, boy, I'm just so appreciating and absorbing all of the love that's coming our way from all of Elisabet's friends. It's wonderful. So to continue this journey, we have Jude Curavan, who is a cosmologist and another very dear friend who is ready to speak with us right now. So Jude, come in from the galaxies and join us, please.
Thank you, Mitch and Deb and everyone. Lynn, oh, that's so moving what you shared of Elisabet. And you said she's a model for us. And I agree. I would describe her not as a role model, though, but as a soul model. Because her soul shone, it radiated in everything she did, mind and heart and purpose and soul. It's a brief story I'd like to share, but it relates to conversations we were having before she got her wings, which was to reframe what we're all going through at the moment from a meta-crisis to a metamorphosis. That sense of that breakdown and breakthrough, whereas the old caterpillar that can't sustain its lifestyle anymore goes into a chrysalis and breaks down into a nutrient soup. And from that nutrient soup, the DNA of the butterfly becomes activated as imaginal cells, because she always served the potential and the possibility of such imaginal cells finding their way and awakening in the world. And I feel everyone on this call has benefited from her nurturing, her guidance, her joyous companionship. And for me, a journey of curiosity together. We both have curiosity as our middle names. So our conversations were always about curiosity and opening and evolutionary potential. So the story I want to share is just before I heard that she had got her wings and knowing her love of butterflies. And it was the first day, I think it was the first day of December here in the UK, very cold. And I was having breakfast with my husband in the kitchen and we looked out the window and there was a butterfly outside the window. But it wasn't just any butterfly. It was a brimstone butterfly. So bright yellow, named after brimstone, sulfur. So I knew immediately it was Elisabet telling me something. And I hadn't heard then that she'd passed. But it was so beautiful, synchronistic, which we often talked about, and significant, because she loved where she lived in Hawaii. She loved the volcanoes. She loved Pele and Maui and Kauai and all the beautiful beings that she was surrounded by, and the seas and the marine beings. So this felt her presence and their presence very close to me. But the other thing is that, as I say, brimstones don't fly in December. So that was the other side of it, that it was her. But she taught me something even today, because I looked up and found that the word butterfly itself was named after the butter color of a brimstone butterfly. So she continues to teach us and find fun with us and dance with us. And as someone said in the chat, she ain't going anywhere until we're all sorted out. So we literally are all in this together and continue this journey together. So thank you, beloved Elisabet, and thank you, dear friends all, for being together for this beautiful honoring of her ongoing soul modeling for us all.
Thank you. Jude, thank you so much for flying in to join us today. We really very much appreciate it, your beautiful words. So I know you have to go, so I'm glad we were able to accommodate you for this moment. It's great. Okay, next we have our old dear friend Kurt Johnson, who runs the EL world behind the scenes like nobody else, and is also a scientist. And he and Elisabet go back a long way, and well, we'll hear a little bit about that right now. Kurt.
Yeah, thanks so much. So I then first got to know Elisabet when she was at the American Museum of Natural History on her postdoc. And I was on the staff there for 25 years in evolution, and she was there on a postdoc. And to put a date on that, it was in the 70s. I had to go back to tell you a bit about our dealings with Margaret Mead, but Margaret passed away in 78. So it would have been before that, so in the 70s. So I would have been young, and Elisabet would have been young. And so it was weird then when I got nominated into the Evolutionary Leaders in 2016, and here suddenly was Elisabet again after 40, 50 years. But just to show about how long she had been involved in the holistic progressive side of the evolution discussion. The way the American Museum is set up is the staff's on the 5th floor, and then people who are there on postdocs and grants are on the 6th floor, and there's not a stairway between the 2 floors. There's actually one of those corkscrew Batman kind of stairways that you go up through the ceiling. And so the way that we would get to know who was new was everybody had to meet at that little bat place where you came down the circular staircase when we would all go to dinner together to the staff cafeteria. And then you'd have a chance to get to know who was really on the reductionist side and the materialist side and who was on the progressive side. So right away, of course, Elisabet was on the same side that I was on, which was on the progressive and holistic side. And the way that that was done was that we had this Xerox room, and all of us that were on the progressive side, we would Xerox everything that was coming out in the journals that was hot, that was turning the conversation the other direction. And the way that you got the attention of everybody at that august institution was there was this gigantic set of tables in the library. And if you wanted people to see something that was hot coming out of the journals, then you would Xerox that, and then you'd go down to the library, put it on the table. And when people came in to browse the tables, because that would show them what was hot, then you were sure that they were going to see it. And then we had a get together twice a month that was called the Evolution Discussion Group that would meet in the evenings. And that institution is very closely connected to the Ivy League. So the Harvard establishment was really there. So those discussions she was also a part of at the time as a postdoc. So Stephen Jay Gould and P.J. Darlington, Ernst Mayr, all those people were still alive at that time. And so brilliant, these people. You got to understand how they could get caught in their head because these people were just so brilliant. But it was amazing that Elisabet, from the get-go was a part of that discussion. So we were championing, plate tectonics and bird dinosaur before that was even accepted. The early work of Lynn Margulies, she had been Elisabet, as you know, was a big champion of. And it's interesting that Bruce is here with Jennifer because, Lynn was married to Carl Sagan at that time. And their son Dorian just did a chapter for a book that I recently did at Yale University Press. So it's interesting that these generations passed down. That's fascinating. So Elisabet was always on that championing that vision from the get-go. And she would have been very, quite young at that time. We probably were both in our 30s. I'd have to do the math. She was born in 36. I was born in 46. But anyway, last thing to say that I think she always remembered the connections we had with Margaret Mead. Now, I was a Holy Cross father at the time, and the reason I was in New York, I was stationed at St. John the Divine, and that's an Anglican order, and Margaret Mead was an Episcopalian, and she was very, very close to the major theologian in our order, whose name was Bonnell Spencer. So anytime that Bonnie, that was his nickname, would come down to New York, we'd get together and go to lunch, and that's how I was able to have time with Elisabet, get to know Margaret. Now, I don't know if they were able to stay in touch because time was running pretty quickly if Margaret passed away in 78. But just all those amazing memories of these big luminary folk that people had the privilege to know when we were all on the planet together. So she was always in that. I hope that the body of work that she's done will really survive as a beacon for this progressive way. My specialty by chance is butterflies. And it's funny you mentioned that because one of the species that I named is from Machu Picchu. All of the elfin butterflies from the Andes are pretty much genera and species that I named in my career. But let's hope that she's circling around Machu Picchu right now as an elfin butterfly as well as a brimstone. So fond memories, and let's just hope that her legacy goes on for a rich time.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Kurt. It's great to hear about these old stories of Museum of Natural History and that time you spent together. And I know it was really deep and rich for you both. So she's made reference to it to me for sure. Thanks for sharing here. I was going to invite our dear Kristen Hoffman to share a song and some words with us next, but she hasn't yet shown up. So I asked if Swami, Steve Behrman, might sing instead. No, don't do that. But maybe you could at least share from your wonderful heart and mind with us your experience and love and appreciation of Elisabet.
Well, thanks so much, Mitchell. First thing that comes to mind is, of course, how her caterpillar to butterfly imaginal cell metaphor has reverberated through the work that Bruce and I did on spontaneous evolution. It's on the cover. And most recently, my connection with her has been through her neighbor there in Oahu, Richard Flyer, and I'm helping Richard write his book, Birthing the Symbiotic Age. And after she passed, we actually included a reference to her and the caterpillar to butterfly, which is the most pertinent metaphor we have right now in regards to things falling apart and things coming together. And I remember Richard and she and I were on a Zoom call early last year, and she was lobbying for Trudy and I to move to Oahu, and she said she would help us find a place. That didn't happen, but it was so great to be reintroduced to her at this stage in her life. And you know, when I tuned in during Deborah's meditation, the words that she flashed to me where she was at was constant radiant light. Yeah. And that's what she is giving us. You know, anytime we want to tune into that, as we go through this dream that we're in right now together, that is available to us. So she's always there. She's always here. So thank you, Elisabet, for constant radiant light shining through whoever remembers her and whoever brings her forth.
Steve and Trudy, both, thank you so much for being here and sharing these words with us. It's all very heartfelt and very meaningful for us all.
Thanks.
Sure. So you're off the hook about singing now, Steve, because Kristen
has
arrived. For whom? No, but we appreciate the thought. Kristen Hoffman, our wonderful angelic singer, just arrived and is now going to come and join us. Kristen. Oh, Kristen. Or maybe she didn't arrive just yet. Okay. Is Nancy Rivard still here? I know she had to leave, but if she hasn't yet, then I would invite her on because I know she has to soon. And no, going once and twice. Okay. It'll take a bit for Kristen to join us. So I would love to invite Diane Williams, another dear old friend, to share with us. Would you, Diane? That would be wonderful.
Sure, happy to. And thank you, Mitchell and Deborah, for organizing this beautiful celebration of our beloved Elisabet's life, and Don Oscar for the beautiful opening, and everyone who offered words and lovely memories of Elisabet. And I didn't know that, Kurt, so just learned something new about your connection with her from way back when. So I was really blessed because I saw Nancy wrote in the chat that she spent 2023 with Elisabet for her birthday. And I know Sharon Joy and I, who's also on this call, I think it was 2022, that we spent Elisabet's birthday in Florida. Mitchell, you were in Florida at the same time. And some of us on this call were actually blessed to spend Elisabet's very last birthday in Mexico at the Evolutionary Leaders Retreat in San Miguel, where Deborah lives. And her last birthday was so joyful and so happy. We had Kristen singing, many people singing, dancing, Mandahi, everybody was singing. So she was super happy. But what touched me about Elisabet's journey to Mexico was that she knew she had to go at any cost, because somebody gave her some sacred crystals many years ago, and she was determined to bring the crystals back to their home in Mexico. And so she was able to do that, and we had a sacred ceremony with her. And I remember I was sitting next to her and she turned to me and she said, "This is the last thing I really needed to do to feel complete in this lifetime." And yeah, so that was, and I'm almost tearing up. But also, somebody mentioned how she felt so committed to grounding the cosmic love. And I know one of her last messages, I wasn't on the EL lounge, but was about making sure that the young people had our support. And we know that her work and legacy will live on through that generation, our future generation, but also through all of us and everybody that's been touched by her work. And on the day she died, I didn't know she died that day, but I felt her presence so strongly. I even called our friend Nina and I said, I think Elisabet.
Okay. I'm trying to, all of a sudden, Deborah had to leave, and so things went a little kaflooey, but I think we are back on track. So would you mind first repeating everything you just said, Diane, for the camera? I'm kidding.
I hope you got some.
That wouldn't be. We did get
I don't think
some.
I could.
You said it so beautifully the first time. I would not want it to be lost to the generations, So, because this is precious. Everybody's contribution is so precious. So, I'm wondering if Kristen is yet here. I don't think so. So, in that case, actually, there is someone who I did speak with earlier, a couple of weeks back, about speaking, who you just made reference to, Diane. So it's actually perfect. Who came to pick Elisabet up down in Naples, where she and I were at Gary Null's ranch at the time for some of her healing. And so it would be wonderful. Sharon, are you with us?
Yes. Hello.
Wonderful. Welcome.
Yeah. Yes.
You're an old-time friend. We'd love to hear from you.
Aren't you all loving the little webs weaving themselves? So Elisabet and I met because of the Institute of Noetic Sciences. Don't you think ions is a strange attractor? Because I think I've met a number of you through some of those webs. And so it seems so fitting because you talked about that story, Diane, and maybe that's why you made the connection, Mitch, because I too have one of Elisabet's gifts that she brought to me when she came for that month of healing in Naples. Mm-hmm. And she said, "I'm going to open it with us." She said, "I was given this arrowhead from the Everglades. And this arrowhead she gave to me for safekeeping to return at the proper time." I can't see it.
Yes.
To the Everglades. So she felt so good that it was in my safekeeping, which to weave more webs, I'm sitting here at Hazel Henderson's home. And Hazel was on the Zoom, if you remember, when we celebrated Elisabet's birthday when she was visiting in Florida. So I'm just noticing these webs. I was thinking, I saw Apila or Pamela Colorado with the World Indigenous Sciences Networks. And that was in my first IONS review that I received when Apila had written an article about the Wayfinders. And now Elisabet went back to be honored right before she left us by the Wayfinders, if you remember. And I'm thinking back to some of the stories that Elisabet and I told back and forth, because she grew up on the Hudson River. Maybe you know that. And she loved walking in the goo and picking up the what, and just sharing those stories many times with different iterations. And then further down the Hudson was another place, some of you may remember, that incredible Mohonk Mountain House.
Oh, yes.
And there was seems to me like an economic gathering, and Elisabet and Susan Davis were out walking around the lake, and Susan was carrying on about her idea, and Elisabet said, "Oh my goodness, go back and tell everybody." And it was about the Business Alliance for Local Living Economies. So more of those webs. And I remember that, of course, I couldn't imagine any storyteller better than Elisabetha to tell the story of imaginal selves. And so by coincidence, some of them are even on this call, we're convening at this imaginal chrysalis, Hazel Henderson's, in Old Town of St. Augustine. As we know, it carries Turtle Island's many, many stories here on this earth. So I honor the earth that I'm sitting upon right now and those who've shared life and journeys and passing right here. So we imagine in our Florida network that the peninsula of Florida is a chrysalis. And so we've been playing around with Fritjof Capra for 6 years, and we've imagined ourselves finding each other through the internet like we're doing right now. And for the first time ever, we're convening in the imaginal chrysalis, Hazel Henderson. So I wanted to bring Hazel. Hazel, can you see? No, you can't see Hazel. Hazel Henderson energy comes in to celebrate our friend Elisabet. And something comes to me to tell you right now, in closing, that we also shared. Let me give you the preamble to the Earth Charter. It's something that we've connected with, many of us. We stand at a critical moment in Earth history, a time when humanity must choose its future. As the world becomes increasingly interdependent and fragile, the future at once holds great peril and great promise. To move forward, we must recognize that in the midst of a magnificent diversity of cultures and life forms, we are one human family and one Earth community with a common destiny. We must join together to bring forth a sustainable global society founded upon respect for nature, universal human rights, economic justice, and a culture of peace. Towards this end, it is imperative that we, the peoples of Earth, declare our responsibility to one another and to the greater community of life and to future generations. So tomorrow we will be addressing the love economy here at Hazel's. So I bring us in to celebrate the weavings of so much of us. And thank you, Elisabet, for grounding us in our hearts. And thank all of us for lighting this fire today, sending her on her way. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Sharon, thanks so much for joining us and bringing in Hazel's energy and spirit into this conversation. She was actually in my little speech that I was waiting until later to share with everyone. But I used to refer to both Hazel and Elisabet as my 88-year-old girlfriends because they were just so dear to me. They were so inspirational. Each of them brought so much intelligence, heart, and soul to the collective conversation, and they were in action. It wasn't just speaking in either case, but absolutely in action in the world globally to let their imprint, intelligence, and impact be felt. So thank you so much.
And I forgot Elisabet's necklace wanted to be worn today.
Fantastic. There are no mistakes.
No.
Or that you are at Hazel's right now. It's all perfect. It's all perfect. And someone I've been referring to for the past many minutes has arrived. Kristen Hoffman, our dear, lovely singer from above. So it's perfect to have Kristen now speak and as the next step here.
Oh, thank you. My apologies. I still had the time as 3 p.m. on my calendar. So I was drinking tea and thinking about Elisabet, and you were all here gathering already. But as I came into the room, I could feel the love that's been cultivated. And I'm sure Elisabet will forgive me for being a little tardy.
I'm sure she will.
So I was thinking so much about Elisabet today, and ever since I first was invited into the Evolutionary Leaders back in 2016, Elisabet took me right under her wing at the first retreat. The theme was Vision Quest, and I see Oscar here. Oscar really was guiding us with so much powerful ceremony. And there was this theme that emerged during that journey of the hummingbird. And I remember Elisabet came to me one day and she said, "You are my ruby-throated hummingbird, and I am your condor." And ever since that moment, we have always referred to each other as, I call her my condor and she calls me her hummingbird. And we've had so many beautiful email exchanges through the years since. But she just reached right out to me. I was one of, I think, the youngest 2 ELs, and so many incredible beings there that I had been reading books of for years. And I was thinking, how did I get here? And Elisabet just wrapped her condor wing around me and said, "Come in, you're in the family now." And I love her so much. It was such a blessing to know her and learn from her and feel mentored by her and her wisdom through the years, her light, and also to be on this Mexico journey in the last January with her as she brought these crystals back to their origin, their home in Mexico. And we held incredible ceremonies and celebrated her 80th birthday together. And I had a chance to sing to her live. And I'm just so grateful, grateful for every moment in Elisabet's light, but also so grateful that I was able to be with her a bit in person in her last year. And it's such a pinnacle moment of her 80th birthday. So I thought, what do I want to sing today? And I have a piece called Love and Gratitude, and it just sprung up in my heart as the perfect offering, just to say, as we're listening, let's just think, wow, Elisabet, let's offer our love and our gratitude from our hearts as we hear her name, just feeling that golden glow and honoring all that she gave us in this lifetime that will be carried forward in our hearts. Okay. And if anyone is unmuted, just make sure you're muted during the music. Thank you, dear ones. Golden flower in bloom, bring us peace tonight, flow from me to you. Words of purest light, gratitude when we forget to see our soul's deep mystery. There's nothing more to do than call on you. Love and gratitude, Elisabet, our gratitude. We love you. Infinite gratitude. Just breathe in the music. Feel how it connects us to the other realms. Feel Elisabet so near, and exhale. Let's just take 2 more deep breaths, breathing in that melody. Feeling Elisabet shining in our hearts. And exhale. Oh, I can hear her laughter, breathing it in. Thank you, Elisabet. Love and gratitude, and exhale. Okay, thank you.
Kristen Hoffman, yet again, so deeply appreciate you and your beautiful voice and your beautiful heart and soul. You have graced us again, truly.
Thank you, dear ones. What a special family.
Yeah.
I can feel the love and the incredible souls gathering around that Elisabet magnetized throughout her life.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mitchell.
Beautifully put. So we all need a deep, beautiful breath after that. As I say also in my Earth Day events that Kristen's been singing at for the past few years, how do you follow that? You know, no one can really do so, but that's not going to stop us. We will try. And the next person I would like to ask to speak is a woman who is representing a good friend of Elisabet's from Bali, a woman named Ruth. The doctor from Bali was not able to join us because it would be 2 or 3 a.m. for her. So she did send an emissary, and that is Ruth, who I believe is still with us. Let me check the portal here. Yes, she is. So, she was. So
I am here.
You are. Okay, very good. If you wouldn't mind, it would be great to hear your relationship with Elisabet or your friend.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm unofficially here on behalf of Jinju Dasala, her husband Nova, and their son Sakai. And
where are you calling in
probably
from?
I'm in the UK, so it's okay. About 7:30 for me, so I could make it. Whereas Bali, it's 3:30 a.m. So yeah, it was a bit early for them to make, but I don't think I probably have the words to fully describe how important Elisabet was to Jinju and her family. Since I've known Jinju for the last couple of years, I've heard many stories about Elisabet and about her impact on them as a family, Sakai. And she's also a luminary for NIASA Institute's work. And I'm not a science person, so I'm a little bit out of place here. She sexuality things before, and it became something that I could see, feel, and understand. And it was so accessible. And I think that's kind of what I've taken from her work. My experience of her work is that it makes these things so accessible to everybody. And I know a couple of people on this call have talked about how they hope that, you know, her legacy is going to live on, and her. I really see that in things like Nyasa Institute, like by people and discovered by new people. And I think that's amazing. So, you know, I can't possibly explain exactly what she meant to Jinju and her family. I know she was a mentor to Jinju since about 2008. But yeah, I wanted to be here for them and kind of to represent them on some way. And it's just been amazing to hear how much she's touched people's lives. And yeah, it's just amazing. So thank you for letting me speak on Jinju's behalf.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ruth, for stepping up and staying up and all of that to do so. You know, as we all know, Elisabet was a world traveler. She's been everywhere. Ronaldo was speaking about her time in Greece and her time. Jennifer referred to her time in Peru, and she's been all over Mexico, Diane mentioned, and Deborah. You know, the world was really her oyster, and she was making impact everywhere she went. So it's not a surprise that she had this kind of impact on your Balinese friends. So it's thank you for sharing. Appreciate it. So now, actually, we've had so much in the way of speaking, and not that we're wholly finished. We're not, but we actually have Gary Malkin, who just arrived, and he's here just very briefly. So I did tell him that I would invite him on to share with us a few words and some music, and then we'll get back to some of your sharing. And I also have a small video clip of my last interview with Elisabet, which we did actually just some weeks before she passed. So it stands as kind of the last video. And who would have known? Who would have thunk it? You know, but it just happened that way. And so I'm very grateful. And I'll just share the first few minutes with you all after a little bit. Okay? So on that note, again, Ruth, thank you. And my dear friend, Gary Malkin, are you there?
Hi, everybody.
You made it. You made
some
it.
familiar faces. I saw Bruce was here. It's such fickle. I've been trying to connect with Bruce for so many decades, and I saw him there, and it's like, there he goes. So hi, hello, Kurt, hello, Kristen. I know some people, and Trudy and Steve. And oh my God, so good to see you guys. Hi, Nancy.
Hi, Gary.
And Diane, so some people I know here, thank you for giving me the opportunity. And I want to say I wish I could have been here for this whole call. I met Elisabet when we were forming the Awakening the Dreamer, Changing the Dream Symposium, when I did all the music for all the media for those half-day symposiums that changed a lot of people's lives, 30 countries, 50 million people or something. It's been quite a beautiful experience. And of course, meeting her at that time when they talked about the butterfly analogy in the media that we created for the Awakening the Dreamer Symposium, like the Brian Swim work, like the work that the universe adventure that Brian Swim's films had, when I heard that analogy, it has been the most overarchingly relevant analogy that has guided our evolutionary journey story since more than any other story there is, right? So then the evolution of Julie Krull's work have this work called Imaginal Souls, right? So I was going to play something of Neil Rogan to honor her. Neil Rogan is the writer and the director of all of the Pachamama media for the first 20 years of its existence. and my best friend who died a couple of years ago. And I have a 2-minute audio from his work. But I actually think that the most appropriate tribute to honor the titan of the beautiful acknowledgement she was just received by being this really the bridge of science and spirituality embodied, right? That who she was, not just what she did and what she worked on, but who she was the full embodiment of heart and mind and soul and expression. So I'm proud to call her a friend because we did talk when she was abroad a number of times, and there was always this warmth because she knew me better than I knew her because of my music. So I felt like the best way to honor her is, and some of you might have heard this already, but it's okay, is a track that I created for the sequel to Thrive. And it was the hardest piece of music I was asked to write because the music needed to reflect the energy of what if love won? What it would feel like if the imaginal cells had fully embodied, and there were no more caterpillar cells around, right? And what would that feel like, you know? And I had to write this music. It was the last cue in the Thrive sequel that was all about what would it take, and it's possible, and it's all within our grasp. And I couldn't do it because I was watching all the wars between Trump and Clinton, and I was eating wrong and not sleeping enough and not meditating every day. And so I went, okay, in order for me to believe this is really happening, this is not a death, but it's a death birth. And it's the birth of imaginal cells, and we're all a part of that, right? I had 10 days of taking care of myself, and then this music came out. And I want to play it specifically as an acknowledgement of who started this unbelievable analogy that has awakened so many of us to a real palpable understanding of where we are right now. There's no better analogy, right? The consumptive cells we're in the last gasp of the caterpillar cells, right? So in honor, in tribute, in homage to this great soul, I want us to practice imagining that for 4 minutes, as we listen together as a collective prayer to this cue, we're actually engaging in imaginal cells calisthenics. We're stretching our wings. We're allowing ourselves to feel the why of her vision. I don't know everything about her life, but her smile and her life's work was enough for me to know that she's one of the most important beings that I have ever met. So in the spirit of that, I'm going to play this piece. If I may have sharing capacity, I do. And I feel so honored, Mitchell, that you let me do this. This is just, what an honor for me. Thank you.
Absolutely. So glad you're here.
My goodness. Yeah, it's still kind of unbelievable she's not here anymore. Same with Neil, Trudy and Steve. How do you imagine these beings who are like so amazing that they're not here? They're here in the other dimension. And that, hopefully this music, when she hears it from the other side, maybe she'll give us a little sign that says, yeah, keep vibrating at the imaginal soul's vibrational field. Here it's a piece Foster calls this the science of love. I want to come up with another name that's like, what if love won, or something like that. We'll figure it out. All right, let's just listen as a collective prayer together. It means that we're all in the unified field together right now. Feet on the ground, breath, connecting with Elisabet and with the love that everyone had for her. And this music is for you. May this moment, may this moment of feeling the success of the imaginal cell's journey as it's working its way through all strata of this world. Just let us just feel the gratitude for Elisabet. I feel the gratitude for her, and I want to thank you for letting me share my most precious gift that was given to me, which is the ability to awaken emotion through music. And I'm so grateful for it, more now than ever, because I know it can go away at any second. So blessings to you all. Thank you for the honor of being with such a beautiful group of people who loved an extraordinary soul. Thank you.
Gary Malkin, thank you so much, my friend, for sharing this with us. It's elevating between you and Kristen. Ay, ay, ay. We're all being elevated, and we'll be hanging out with Elisabet in no time. Literally no time.
I have to leave at 3, and damn it, I'm going to have to hear the recording of this, but I'm going to stay on as long as I can.
Yes.
Thank you, beloved ones.
Yes. We will have a recording of it, so you will be able to hear it. Okay? Thanks again. So we have a little bit more. Let's see. Actually, I rarely do this. I usually do everything impromptu, but I did write a little piece. It's not long, but it kind of creates some context around Elisabet that I thought we should all have, slightly historical and slightly current. So I'll just, if you would indulge me, I'll just share this with you. There's so much we can say about Elisabet. One doesn't know quite where to begin. Is it her climbing trees like a tomboy up in rural Hudson, New York, where she grew up, when she started playing with insects and little creatures when she was a little girl in her backyard, which led to her love of living things, which morphed into her passion for biology and studying the natural world? Or to speak of her deep affinity with indigenous people around the world, into several of whose tribes she was welcomed and blessed, a wisdom that always guided her work? Or to speak of her profound commitment to peace and harmony around the world, her deep love of nature, planet, and yes, the universe? These are just some of the many facets of this diamond we refer to as Elisabet Sahtouris, a futurist, a world-renowned evolution biologist, an activist par excellence, not once getting herself challenged by authorities. I have had the extraordinary opportunity to get to know several women of her generation, all of whom were trailblazers, and all of whom were very good friends. Our own visionary Barbara Marx Hubbard, futurist Hazel Henderson, as Sharon referred to a lot before, founder of the Kins Network and one of the first women in banking breaking through those barriers, Susan Davis, and futurist and visionary, of course, our Elisabet Sahtouris. I love them so much. I used to call Hazel and Elisabet my 88-year-old girlfriends. Jean Houston is actually among them, but Jean doesn't age. She's an immortalist, so she won't be counted in the same way, but she'll be continuing, no doubt, long after we have all parted this plane. All these women have contributed to moving our society and world forward in significant ways, and I am, and we are, grateful to each of them for their commitment to creating a better and more enlightened world. Gratitude is definitely the operative word here, and our and other people's lives have been impacted by their passion for life and their commitment. In closing, I feel that Elisabet modeled a way of being, even all the way to the end when facing death. She looked forward to moving on and releasing this mortal coil. She looked forward to seeing her good friends again, and those I mentioned who have already passed, and many others. She engaged me in an imaginative exercise to shape one's life and what that would look like. And we had some quite some fun doing it, imagining what one's next life would look like while still in this one. I have to say that toward the end, we were speaking a fair amount by phone. And then she said that as of Monday, late November, she'd be going into meditation, basically toward the light. Yet just a day or two before, we were schmoozing as usual about both big things and small, what's happening in the world, laughing and joking about one thing or another, as we always had. And it was very odd for me to experience that moment when I had to decide whether I was going to call her again or not, or just let her move into the light which she had so asked for and yearned for without yet another terrestrial interruption. It was tough, but I did not make that call. And then shortly thereafter, her good friend Roger Epstein, who was so close to her in Hawaii, taking care of her at the very end and before, contacted us and informed us of her passing. That she got, well, what she had been asking for, her wings. We love you, Elisabet. No matter what form or dimension you're in, your spirit will always be with us. So I wanted to share all of that with you all as I contemplated today and are all coming together to share together. Let me ask if, was that good for everybody to hear? And excellent, excellent. Now I do have a few minutes of a video I'd like to share, but before I do that, I'd actually just like to open this up to all who are still here. I know a number of people did have to leave, but we still have a wonderful, lovely group of people here. And if there is someone who hasn't yet shared or someone who got inspired to share who has already spoken, all of that, the door is open. And let's take the next few minutes for that. Dave Radcliffe, I know you were waving your hand at a certain moment, and you're waving two hands now. Okay, fine. Is there anyone else? If so, this would be a good moment to step forward. And if not, I will see if I can share my screen. I'll wait a moment. And let's see here if I can pull this off. But what I will do is I will add it to the final version of the recording. That will be a lot easier. And we'll do it that way. Okay, so that's what we'll do. So we are close to the time when I was looking to really wrap this up. I just want to ask one more time if there is anyone who would like to share. And if not, then Kristen, would you mind perhaps doing a closing song for us all? And we will exit with that. And in deep gratitude to all of you who have come to share this special honoring of our dear friend Elisabet. Each one of you, I so appreciate your presence and those who spoke, your contribution.
Nancy Brown has her hand up. I don't know if you see that.
Oh, she does.
Yeah.
Oh, there you are, Nancy. Of course. Great.
I was putting something in the chat, but I can't seem to make it go in there. So I just was feeling it's such a blessing to see so many longtime friends of the heart and hear so many shared stories. Elisabet used to come to, when she lived in Santa Barbara, and I did too, she would come over to the salons. It was before Barbara Marx Hubbard started coming, I think, even. And such a dear. I remember just thinking of so many of the passing friends, Barbara, Hazel, Susan, Eve, and Elisabet, and more that we're not even aware of probably. I can't help but feel they kind of all graduated into an even larger playground together and are still leading the way with their light and love and wisdom. And we all had that in common, the playfulness, to the joy and the playfulness when we got together. So they're up there partying and continuing the work. I know. Thank you.
Beautiful. Great, Nancy. It's great. I love the idea, as you could tell from what I wrote, of bringing these powerhouses of these women, Barbara, Hazel, Susan, Elisabet, together. And as I playfully mentioned, Jean, but Jean is more alive than most human beings. So she's not going anywhere. But thank you so much, Nancy. I see Evelyn. Yes, please.
Yes, thank you. Hello from Estonia as well.
Oh, yes. Хорошо.
Yes, I did share a couple of sentences in the chat, but as it has been so inspiring, I wanted to say a few more things with my voice as well. So thank you really much for that kind of nice event for Elisabet. And I only got to meet her once, but not so many years ago, only 2023. So she was doing a training here in Estonia, and she visited a couple of other places and did some other seminars. So it was very inspiring to see her and meet her. And one other thing that I remember what was really important for me to see was to see and feel her groundedness and how clear she was in that age. So it was very inspiring for me to see. I'm in my 40s, and to see someone in her 80s and be so like present and clear and caring. It's very inspiring. So I'm really glad that I was able to join this training, and very thankful for Thomas Torpedo in Estonia, who has been doing different kind of activities for Gaia's Academy for already 30 years. And has also translated the book here into Estonian. So I'm really appreciate that kind of nets and networks, or how it was said by someone who was here. So we're kind of like sprinkling around and connecting with each other. So thank you once more.
Spasiba. Thank you.
Thank you.
Really a pleasure. What you said, Evelyn, also made what I wrote, what I spoke, even more difficult about not calling Elisabet that last time, so to speak, because she was so clear and coherent and totally present up to the last end. And sometimes, of course, when people age, a little bit of dementia kicks in and like that, and they're not fully present in the same way. Not with Elisabet, literally up to the end. So it felt like we should simply continue. And don't think that I didn't have the thought and discussed with several people on the Evolutionary Leaders Lounge a couple of times. Well, why are we just letting her go? I mean, why do not we say something, And I did in my own way. I did. Are you sure you want to do this? But when I got an emphatic yes, I knew I had to listen. But you highlighted part of why it was so difficult to let her go, being the highly conscious being that she is. Alan.
Hey, sorry we're late, and the Hurtocks are going to be joining me. But the one thing, I'm not just the one thing, but what Elisabet used to say in the discussions I had with her is she wanted to play the full keyboard, right? From the low. And I think this may be the final note that she wanted to play that would be that scope of her life. And she wanted to play it the way she wanted to play it. And it just kind of goes along with her philosophy that, we want the full range of it all. And by consciously doing that, leaving, I think that's I mean, who knows? It's a kind of completion. It's a kind of fulfillment. It's a kind of, being control of her life, which she felt maybe like she wasn't in control of for many years because she was in so much pain. So, but a fantastic human being. I remember first time I met her was at Emily Squire's apartment, and she was so direct and so together and smart, and when we saw her in Florida that time, Mitchell, she looked like she was having a great time with you. You know, you were really enjoying each other, and and you took her to that beautiful place. That was very nice. You were taking her to Gary Knowles' place, and she very much enjoyed her time there, and we enjoyed her, and Diane was there. It was just such a nice sort of gathering.
Desiree.
Yeah, we're happy we can get on Dr. Hertax here as well.
Yes, we're very honored to be with this memorial for our beloved sister. Elisabet was fantastic, and many of you do not know that her mind literally took us to the stars. She was part of a research team that participated at the first disclosure conference by the American government in Washington, D.C. in May of 1995. She was able to forecast how our human community would ultimately be connected with the star nations. Many of you may or may not know Desiree and I are honorary members of the Xavante Nation from Brazil. And Elisabet was always keen in working with peoples from Peru, from Brazil, from South America, and of course in Japan, where she was especially honored for her great contributions.
Well, maybe can Dr. Hertax just say a few words of blessing for this? Is that because you're almost closing at this point? Sorry, we were at a previous appointment. Go ahead.
Divine Source, creator of all creation, we honor the great ascension of our beloved sister Elisabet, to be united with the star nations, the people of light, those from the higher dimensions, sometimes referred to as the archangelic, the ultra-terrestrial, the emissaries of light. We bless this day and we bless her memory. May her great work of unity for all people, compassion, particularly for the meek and the suffering, be a reminder to each of us of the higher path that we have taken in this life to be of service, of unity. May the spirit of and the testament of Elisabet speak volumes in human relations, but more importantly, as we prepare as a humanity to open into the fifth dimension.
Yes, I visualize her in the stars in the heavens, beautiful golden locks of hair, and even sounds of vibrations of the choir of angels.
She really actually does feel present right now to me in this moment, and listening and feeling, because she was a great feeling person with a great intelligence, a real human being. So happy I had known her, and a very rare human being to know. And so thank you, Mitchell, for this blessing of a gathering and this time. I mean, she's on to another adventure, but we're here to just feel the wake she left on this earth, and that was it was beautiful. So.
Nice way to put it. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Desiree. Thank you, JJ. I'm so glad you managed to get in at the end here,
right?
And share with us your thoughts and feelings and blessings.
Yeah,
Mitchell, thank you so much for bringing all of us together. Elisabet is truly a way short to the higher dimensional worlds that we're beginning to understand. And we ask that she be remembered also in the future negotiations. I will see to it, if I am called upon to give testimony, that she was there at the very beginning with John Mack and myself, speaking of the humility that we as a human race have to have if we are to understand what the indigenous elders have taught us, that we are slaves to no one but servants of all.
And she's also in the Hollow Movement book that's available. And
the article that we did with her.
Yes. Excellent.
I want to hear some of the highlight, but you don't want to go. We'll watch the video. But I hope we didn't miss Kristen singing.
Well, right when we were saying goodbye, the four of us here, Kristen is going to bless us with a final song that she said is perfect for the conclusion of today's event.
Wow.
So, JJ, Desiree, Alan, thank you, my friends.
Thank you.
Good.
Oh, so beautiful. Actually, you all, Alan, JJ, Desiree, you just planted the seed of aha. I have the perfect final song. And a very short time after Elisabet passed on, I was contacted by an incredible visionary and researcher between the realms. I would say she works in similar fields in a way to Elisabet. And she said, I have seen since I was a little girl, her name's Adele Lambourne. She said, whenever I'm in the other realms, I have been introduced and known Mother Earth, the highest origin of Mother Earth, as Maravati. And she said she got this message from the other realms that there was going to be an encoding brought down so that we in this dimension could start to help Maravati remember divine origin blueprint, and that we would be able to use this piece to literally go out into nature and play this encoding into nature and sing it to nature. And she said, I was also shown that you would be bringing it through. So at the end of December, I brought through this piece, Maravati, and it will release worldwide on the equinox. But I feel that as you were all speaking these final important words, I realized, oh, this piece, Elisabet is calling it forward for us to integrate our love of the nature, the matrix of who we are, our understanding of who we are in this realm, with all of the cosmic expressions. And so as you're listening, just feel that integration. Feel Elisabet in her new form, continuing her work. Okay. And if you happen to be unmuted, I would say mute your microphone.
Maravati, Maravati.
Infinite gratitude, infinite gratitude. And, you know, on the equinox, when this comes out last month on the new moon, over 1,000 people around the world went out into nature and played and sang this piece to nature at the same time. And we're going to do it again on the equinox. So maybe we can call in Elisabet as we do that, if you feel so inspired. So that'll be my invitation, that we go out on this equinox for Elisabet to connect to Mother Nature, which she so loved and understood.
Because Kristen asked us to mute so we wouldn't interrupt her angelic voice. And I obeyed, something I don't do that often. So thank you all for being part of today's celebration of our dear Elisabet. This has been beautiful for everyone involved. I appreciate everyone's contribution. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
And it is a gift to us of her life. And this is our gift back to her of how deeply we love and appreciate her. So I appreciate all of you. I also want to also say that you'll be able to hear Kristen at A Better World's Earth Day event on Monday, April 21st. Again, she's been joining us for the past several years, and not last year, but the year before, Elisabet and the Hertogs and Bruce Lipton were all speakers as well. So you can go to our website, abetterworld.net, and tune in to hear all of it in Technicolor. So thanks again for joining. If anybody wants a recording and you're not on the list that received the invitation in the first place, just email me at mjr@abetterworld.net, and I'll make sure a few people asked to be included that they just texted me. But if you do want the recording, and we'll probably make it on the EL website as well, so it can be heard by all. Thank you. Thank you from the depth of my heart to all yet again. And Elisabet, bless you. Love you.
Elisabet. Love you. Thank you, Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mitchell.
Did a
My
beautiful
pleasure,
job.
everybody.
Blessings to all.
You're all dear.
To Diane in New York.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Love you, dear family.
You know, if there's anything we have in abundance nowadays, it's conflict, and all of us are faced with it all the time. And one of my favorite ones is this conflict between science and religion, between matter and spirit.
And it's like they're butting horns like two bulls, one has a Darwinian theory and one has some kind of a religious theory called creationism nowadays. And I am a biologist, an evolution biologist, which means I'm a deep pastist in order to be a futurist. And so I asked myself about this, why is this conflict between science and spirit going on? After all, I think nature is wildly creative. So sometimes I say I'm a creationist evolution biologist, just to see what people think. It's not supposed to be possible. I'm a scientist. How can I be a creationist? But my model of the universe is really like a piano keyboard. And when you look at a keyboard, you see matter in the low keys, and then you see energy in the middle range, and higher up is spirit. And the spiritual people stand on the high end of the keyboard looking down on it, and the scientists stand on the low end of the keyboard looking up on it. They have no idea they're on the same keyboard. But physicists have been telling us for a century that the universe is made up of frequencies, of vibrations, which means keys on a keyboard. We've got black keys and white keys, and we've got low keys and high keys. And when people say to you, we must raise our vibrations, I always say to them, yeah, do that, but don't forget to play in the low keys, or you'll vibrate yourself out of here. You don't want to do that. You want to learn how to play on the whole keyboard and how to undo the barriers we've set up along the keyboard between, say, science and spirituality, and build yourself a story of the world that's whole, that permits you to play in low keys and high keys in the mid-range, to find people you resonate with, to make beautiful chords. Not to have to all be alike, but to look for diversity, look for people you can work with on projects because they have different perspectives from yours. Very important. The more keys we have, the more parts of the keyboard we're playing on, looking from, moving into, crossing over, and things like that, the richer the view we get of our world, and the more we learn about harmony and cooperation.
Hello and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin, and I'm very glad you're joining us again today. Today, we're going to have a very interesting show. I have invited on a very dear friend and colleague, Elisabet Sahtouris. I want to tell you a little bit about Elisabet, and then we'll be going into really sort of bringing forward this incredible life that she has had and continues to have, and bringing forward some of her fundamental ideas that she has put into circulation planet-wide in a lot of the consulting she has done, a lot of the teaching she has done, a lot of the writing that she has done in her numerous books. So here's a little bio on Elisabet, and then we will open it up and dive right in. Elisabet Sahtouris, PhD, is an evolution biologist, futurist, author, speaker, and consultant on living systems design. Showing the relevance of evolving biological systems to organized design, she has traveled as a speaker to literally all continents on the planet. She has made television and radio appearances in addition to live speeches and workshops. Dr. Sahtouris is both a US and Greek citizen with a PhD from Canada. She did her postdoctoral work at the American Museum of Natural History in New York, taught at the University of Massachusetts, MIT, was a science writer for the Horizon Nova TV series. She was invited by China by the Chinese National Science Association, organized Earth Celebrations 2000 in Athens, Greece, and has been a UN consultant on indigenous projects. She is a participant in the Humanity 3000 dialogues of the Foundation for the Future, the Synthesis dialogues with His Holiness the Dalai Lama in Dharamsala, and consults with corporations and government organizations in Australia, Brazil, and the United States. She's written several books: Biology Revision, A Walk Through Time, From Stardust to Us, and Earth Dance, Living Systems in Evolution. So it's truly a pleasure to have Elisabet on A Better World to talk about and to unpack a life full of rich thought, feeling, and commitment to, well, creating a better world. So Elisabet, welcome, aloha. So great to have you from Hawaii in our New York studio, essentially. So, wow, you have just had a stellar life in so many ways, and you continue to produce and manufacture and write and teach. Evolutionary Leaders Circle, you gave a talk to not that long ago, which I loved. You've been really hailed as one of the prominent thinkers in the 20th and 21st centuries, and it's beautiful to see, and your thoughts and books have had serious impact. Where did all this begin? What inspired you early on in your life to move in this direction, and where are you from?
Aloha nui to you, my dear friend Mitchell, and to our audience from, yes, in Hawaii, in the mid-Pacific, an interesting perspective on planet Earth. I was born in the Hudson Valley, and I have a tree behind me now, and within a mile of the hospital I was born in Cairo, New York. They pronounce it Cairo when it's in Egypt, but it's Cairo in the Hudson Valley. Within a mile of that, in the quarries where we used to jump in and swim when I was a kid, they discovered a fossil of the largest tree ever found and the oldest tree ever found. It's really an amazing thing for me, because I am such a tree lover, to know that I was born right among the roots, so to speak, of the most ancient tree of the world, or the biggest one. I still have the mud of the Hudson River between my toes. I can remember the feel of squishing around among the lily pads and collecting frogs and salamanders and things that we were allowed to keep in a big old iron bathtub in the yard for a while. Turtles, even snapping turtles occasionally. And I was blessed to be consigned to nature, so to speak, by my very busy mother, who was running a boarding house almost single-handedly, doing all the laundry, the cooking, the cleaning, the organizing, the bookkeeping, you name it. And so we were, as little kids, we were like shoved out the door in the morning with a peanut butter sandwich or something and come back at sunset, right? Maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but in the winter, my father rigged up lights in the backyard so we could keep playing in the snow until it was actually supper time, since it gets dark at 4 o'clock in upstate New York in the winter. And we built snow houses there. Anyway, it was a most fascinating childhood, because I was out in nature, communing with it, with no grown-ups watching what I was doing or telling me how to relate to it. And so if I wanted to be with a woodpecker who was too high in a tree for me to climb up, I could take my mind up and be with that woodpecker. And there were no boundaries of the kind I was taught later between myself and the rest of nature. And there was nothing in my book to be afraid of, even if occasionally you got stung by a wasp or, something. We would cross roaring creeks on slimy logs and fix up old boats to take out onto the Hudson. And in the winter, we crossed the Hudson River on the ice, walking. That same ice that was harvested in blocks and delivered to my mom for her ice box. I'm almost 86, and I was born in 1936, at the very beginning of it, as a double Aquarian, by the way. So I've always been destined, I think, to be a big picture thinker.
Yes.
And so I got that almost complete immersion in nature from the get-go, and there was nothing in my book to be afraid of. Some of the boarders would say, that little mouse is going to grow up into a big rat, and you can't be playing with these things. And we're thinking, grown up. I'd say to my little brother, what do they know? They don't even know that mice don't turn into rats, right? And we would scoop baby bunnies out of holes in the lawn and run them through our sunsuits for the warm, delicious feeling of their furry little bodies, and then put them back. And the moms didn't abandon them, as the grown-ups said they would, because the moms, they knew they could pick up the vibes of innocent children, and that was not something for them to shun either. So that
This
intense
is so interesting,
experience.
Elisabet, because you're laying out a kind of idyllic childhood that used to be so common, and today so many children are raised not even on grass but on cement. And so you had this beautiful and what was extremely common and natural, we call it a luxury now, of being able to commune, live inside of nature and all of her wonderful little furry animals, and love them, freely love them, and allow your imagination, like you were describing about the woodpecker, to go there and sit on the branch with him or her, and peck away, and have that experience as though internally. So doesn't it make beautiful sense? And this is why I wanted to kind of ask you about this, that you became a biologist with an emphasis on evolution and understanding the breadth that you do of our inherent relationship to nature. In fact, sometimes I say to people, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about this, we don't even have a relationship to nature because we are nature. So when you have a relationship, it's as though it's with something outside of you. But here, it's not. It's one. But that's not our usual consciousness. Our usual way of thinking is that we're here and it is there. So, your thoughts?
Yeah. And yes, I wanted to be a biologist early. I was skipped ahead in school, and there was no kindergarten when I started school. And so I was 10 years old in the 7th grade. And and I had a biology teacher for the first time, and I knew that I wanted to be a biologist right then and there. We were dissecting frogs and stuff in class, and I knew where I wanted to go.
Wow.
And that was it, as you said, it was an idyllic time in so many ways. Shopping was going from farm to farm in my father's Model T Ford with the loaded up vegetables my mom had grown to give to other people. And then we'd pick up chickens and eggs at one farm and milk from a cow that was designated for our family, and we made butter out of, and another farm. And one fruit farm had a cider mill and fruit and honey, and we watched him working with the bees, Uncle Gus, with the bees. And so I lived on 100% organic food long before the word organic was coined. And we lived in harmony with nature. The entire Hudson Valley was populated by European immigrants, who knew how to farm and who traded fertilizer and food and things like that. So even though things were rationed and we had to buy illicit sugar in 100-pound bags in New York City, hidden in my father's truck, and we would sit on it with blankets covering it. It was black market sugar so that my mom could can all these fruits and things for the winter, right?
Why was it illegal?
It was because it was rationed, so you couldn't buy quantities of sugar.
Oh, yeah, right.
So anyway, that ideal, I bless my childhood. And the business of no grown-ups watching was important because no one said, don't climb that tree, you'll fall, you'll hurt yourself, things like that. And I wrote a poem for kids on Earth Day once, much later, that was called No Grown-Ups Watching. And it was the things I learned from climbing high so you could see far, from crossing fences that said no trespassing, from walking out on the river ice in the winter. And I would followed up with, we're all walking on thin ice now, and we all have to break some rules now, and we all have to have a big picture view of things, you know, by seeing far.
Metaphors galore.
Metaphors galore, and it was wonderful. Unfortunately, my parents kind of pushed me into going to art school in university, where I went at 16, because they you know, this was a time when girls went to college to get a good husband, if they went at all. and my biology didn't make sense to them as a, you know, what was I going to do? Become that. Yeah. Oh, did I want to be a medical illustrator? Because I had talent as an artist, they said. Yeah. Nice. So I was pushed toward art. And I didn't get to study science until I was a graduate student, but eventually I did.
It's funny, it's usually the other way around. Some people get pushed into math and science and they really want to be an artist. Here, yes. It was the inverse.
Exactly. So I did become an evolution biologist, and it was because I, from early as a child, had been interested in the questions of who are we and where did we come from and where we headed, not knowing they were the great philosophical questions of all time, right? Sure. That I just naturally came upon these kinds of questions of wanting to know and assuming that the answers lay in the study of nature. I was a natural creature, and I was part of it.
I was born in New York City, in Queens, actually, and I asked those same questions of myself very early on. Honestly, when I was 4, 5, and 6 is when I began. But because of my milieu, I was given toward more philosophy, psychology, existential thought, which is, of course, my mother was training me in it at that very early age for lots of reasons. But you had a closer relationship to nature back then, and you turned to nature for answers. I turned instead to these subjects, but the same fundamental questions.
Yeah, and I never wavered from seeing nature as the most phenomenal teacher for humans, and I'm still preaching that.
Yes, well, I turned in your direction, and not to become a scientist, but to appreciate nature. So there is biomimicry at base in virtually everything I think, and I know you were born that way. You know? So what then happened? You've traveled the world, you've lived in Greece, you're part Greek. You've lived in Mallorca, you've lived in different parts of the world, you've traveled extensively, sharing your thoughts and convictions about what the world needs to know about its own process. How would you describe some of what you felt was your guiding thoughts and themes over the course of these years?
Well, the guiding principle always was, what can we learn from nature and how can it make human evolution more successful? You know, I've lived a phenomenally interesting life. I've been privileged as a speaker to be in the most diverse set of venues I reckon any speaker has ever been allowed to speak in, from big corporations and universities to science conferences, to fashion conferences, to UFO conferences, to, I mean, you name it. I've been all over the map.
Spend time in Peru with indigenous people, and tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I was a co-founder of something called the Worldwide Indigenous Science Network, because in looking at and in being a scientist to learn from nature, I also recognized that, and this was part of my training, Mitchell, as a graduate school, as an early graduate student in science,
we were asked to design a science by writing out the axioms on which it would be founded. And this was a philosophy of science course in which I became aware that a science only works if it has a worldview, which is called the set of axioms, the set of statements on which it rests.
Sure.
And so I was, of course, trained in what I call Western science, okay? And Western science has as its foundational statements things like the universe is made up of matter and energy. The universe can be studied objectively as though you were not a part of it. They added in after a while, the whole universe is it's meaningless, it's purposeless, it's material. And it's running down by something called entropy. It dissipates its energy over time.
This is essentially Newtonian and to some extent Einsteinian ideology, if you don't mind my using that word.
Well, yes, that's what I came to recognize it as later. But it was, without that belief system, you can't have a science, you see.
Right.
And the axioms are written by whatever the founders of a science take for granted as being reality.
Correct.
And humans are storytelling creatures, and that's how we live, by these stories. So you see, you cannot make up a theory or test it if you have no idea what a universe is. You can't talk about a universe without some conception of what it is, which is what the axioms are all about.
Right. You have to start somewhere.
You have to start with a set of statements that are the beliefs in the minds of whoever is founding the science. So I began to recognize that there's more than one science in the world.
Yeah.
And I held some international symposia over time to test out bringing together a very wide variety of people with PhDs in Western science, but people who came from different cultures and were taught Western science, write out the axioms you were taught. What were the foundational beliefs you were taught? We ended up with hundreds of statements and whittled them down into like 10 basic ones. And so the first symposium was about, what is this paradigm shift we're talking about? Well, I wanted to map out what was the standard model of physics worldview that we have been taught, and what was it that we were shifting to?
Sure.
Well, of course, because of quantum scientists all turning to Vedic science from India to explain their findings when they pushed all the way down through matter to pure energy and cosmic consciousness.
Sure.
They had no axioms, except by going to Vedic science, where they had a different set of axioms, where the universe starts as a field of consciousness and then slows the vibrations down into matter and energy. So
beautiful.
So it really was a comparison of Vedic science and Western science that we were looking at for this shift. And that was back.
But Niels Bohr and the other early quantum physicists did formulate a mathematics that depicted, detailed that larger perspective on the relationship of matter and spirit, actually, and energy, correct?
Yes, that is true. And that I had to go into the foundations of mathematics for that one.
Right. Of course.
So math also rests on a set of axioms. In fact, that's where we first got the word axiom, the concepts of axioms and
yes, in mathematics.
That in mathematics, to say there are objects and there are relationships, right? And so the universe is made of things and of relationships between the things. And then I found out that some indigenous sciences had a very different view. I ran into Benjamin Lee Whorf's work.
Oh, yes, the linguist.
And he became extremely important to me
because he made sense of how different cultures perceive the world differently through language. And that the Indo-European languages were based on this concept of separating things and actions, like water that falls make a waterfall, stars that shine, and in an indigenous language like Hopi or Nootka, you can't make that separation. It's a process language where the shiningness of the star is the star.
Yeah.
The fallingness
There's
of
not
the
a
water
subject
is the
and
water.
object.
There are no objects.
The way we think sequentially, linearly, it's almost a gestaltic language where everything is happening, if you will, at once. A thing we call a star is providing shining, a verb.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So,
is that an accurate?
So that kind of a language would start with a concept like feasting, and then bring in what will be feasted and who will be coming to it, and it all gets woven together in a coherent whole where everyone is aware of the planning process and the actual event and the aftermath of the event as a flow through a timeline, right?
Yes.
When it's always eternal now, but you're flowing through, you're running your life through that eternal now. Right?
That's a very important point you're making, Elisabet, is what is time in different linguistic structures. For instance, the Chinese, as far as I understand, and my Chinese is very limited, but they do not have a past, present, and future as we conceive it. I mean, it's an ideogrammatic language anyway. It's pictorial. And so it's one image after another, which again is, if you will, a Gestalt style, in the moment, snapshot of reality, moving from one to another, but not the way our language, grammatics in English lead us.
That's right. So I ended up with this keyboard model where what all the scientists seem to agree on. And by the way, I did another symposium on Islamic science, and the poor Islamic scientists and philosophers had no idea what I was trying to get at when I wanted them to write out their axioms, but eventually they did it. And it was fascinating because by then I had a material universe of Western science, and I had a consciousness-based universe from Vedic science, quantum science. And now I got one that actually turned out to be a living science, because axiom number one was Allah created the universe, right? This is Islam. Axiom number two was Allah created a living universe and told us to study it. And so there was this profound study of nature in Islamic science. And I thought, wow, there's a parliament of world religions that agree on certain fundamentals and then act as kind of interesting checks and balances to each other. Why can't we have a global parliament or a global consortium of sciences, including indigenous sciences? And I wanted Taoist science to come in there and have them all agree that science is science because it rests on a set of assumptions, and that you can build science on different assumptions, and then have the living nature kinds of interested sciences be check and balance on the Western science, which led to a lot of technology, so that you can say, but you can't have technology that interferes with nature's well-being, right? And that this would be really, really important in the world, to have the same friendly interchange among these sciences, recognizing them, because Western science is completely arrogant about thinking it's the only one.
You're also implying the possibility of a moral compass emerging from a biological understanding. And that is an entire interesting subject in itself, which is the biology of morality, just as there is the idea of a biology or physiology of altruism, of kindness, of cooperation, that neuroscience and neuropsychology are speaking of these days. as a newer, better, more thorough understanding of Darwinian evolution.
Well, if you want to understand ethics, study your own body. It's the most ethical consortium of cells you can imagine. If any part of the body is injured, resources immediately go there, and the rest of the body allows that to happen. Even though they may have a little less adrenaline or whatever at the moment, right, there's an awareness that the whole depends on the health of all of the parts.
That is beautiful.
So you have
You're
ethics,
totally right. Yeah.
and you have economics. I mean, look at
exactly.
the economics of the blood supply
blood supply. I mean, how is it that a liver can take over some of the functions of a kidney? I mean, how does that happen? Except for, our understanding of stem cells these days helps us understand that kind of, wait a minute, you are entirely different organs. How can you do this? Except they do.
Well, let me go back for a minute to I started mentioning I had a keyboard model that all the sciences seem to agree somehow that the universe is made of vibrations. That doesn't seem to be a very controversial issue.
At base, correct. And so, thanks to Vedic science for articulating it so well.
Yeah.
And Sanskrit, by the way. Right?
You what?
And Sanskrit, by the way. Talking about the language affecting consciousness.
Oh, yes. And so if you just arrange vibrations in a sequence, you can use the metaphor of a keyboard, an infinitely long keyboard, right? And so if you put matter in the low keys, the slow vibrations of matter in the low keys, and then move it up into electromagnetic energy as you go up the keyboard, by that time, Einstein showed us, hey, energy is matter, matter is energy. You can transpose the music up and down between these two, right? And then Western science gets stuck. It can't go higher up in the keyboard because things get less and less material as you go up the keyboard into mind and consciousness. And because Western science decreed that things are real only if they're measurable, to be measurable required an instrument made of matter. So you can't measure the consciousness, the spirit, that end of the keyboard, you're stuck. The Eastern sciences started at the other end of the same keyboard, the same universe. Yeah. And so they, as I said before, they can slow down and see how you get, we're up to 0 point energy. That's the highest we can reach. They can go back down through 0 point energy to electromagnetic energy to matter, right? With no problem. So the Taoist keyboard, for instance, is exactly that matter, energy, spirit.
Just what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Taoism is very much about the human in nature role. You see, so that was why I thought that was the important fourth one to have after the material universe, the consciousness-based universe, the living biological universe, and then the one that connects humans to nature.
That's right.
And really asks, how do
Heaven, man, and
exist within
one
that
unified field in the Taoist worldview?
So that one is very much about the context of nature.
Yeah.
And I remember my son, long ago asked me, why do you have to talk about the whole universe to explore anything? And I had to think about that. And I said, I think it's because I'm a context chaser.
Yeah.
I said, a rose is a very different thing to a donkey or to a perfume manufacturer or to a lover or to a gardener. Yeah. It depends on the context that this rose is perceived in. And it looks very different to a cat and to a rat and, to a tree, perhaps. Chasing that, once you get to a context, you find that bubble has a larger context and a larger. So as a biologist, if you're into, particles within molecules, within atoms and molecules, and then cells, and then cell groups and organs and tissues and bodies and communities and
societies and planets, and you get all the way up to the universe, chasing contexts.
Exactly. And it begs the subject of fractality. So understanding that as a biologist, if you're looking in a microscope, you have one universe, and then you continue to expand outward, and have a different sort of relationship to and identity with an ever expanding universe, which of course is another fundamental axiom of what I believe you've been pointing to all
along. So we're big picture thinkers, and we like to look at contexts. And there are so many things that are easier to understand when you come from that perspective, where you're always looking at the role of the individual in relation to the community as a whole. And where, a few years ago, the evolution biologist Tamsin Woolley Barker pointed out that true social species have only evolved 6 times in evolution. And 4 of them are the insects that we know about, the ants and the bees and the termites.
Oh, really?
Right. And that leaves only 2 more. And the only 2
I'm getting
beyond
nervous.
the insect world are blind mole rats, which
Oh.
live by the millions in underground colonies with very structured societies. Blind mole rats. And humans.
I knew we were in there somewhere.
And this is great, because she comes along at a time when evolution biologists are beginning to get that cooperation is way more important in evolution than competition, which is always there. But
Sure.
There's, for me personally, I started calling it a maturation cycle, where species and whole epochs move from hostile competition to mature collaboration.
Yeah.
And where crisis is always the opportunity from getting through that shift, which we're now in ourselves. And so David Sloan Wilson, after E.O. Wilson, and they're all coming out with these concepts of altruism and givingness and
Very
sharingness and cooperation. And that's why humans have been successful, because these naked apes had to get together in groups in order to survive in, after big ice ages or during big ice
Predation.
ages with giant mammals. And
Exactly. I often say, Elisabet, and I'd love to hear what you have to say, is that this is the origin of storytelling. It's actually the origin of art. It's the beginning of theater. People had to entertain each other by the bonfire to stay warm and to enjoy each other and build social relationships, which of course releases oxytocin, which increases the love bond between people. So when it comes down to it, they're going to be looking to protect each other in the face of a predator. And then it goes down another micro step to the importance of smiling and laughing and embracing, hugging as an important part of evolution. Not to mention, of course,
knew
love
oxytocin.
I'm sorry?
They understood oxytocin.
They understood it, right?
Long
in
before
their
they had
blood.
named it.
That's right.
But what's interesting is that if you play the whole keyboard and you're not a body with a mind, with a soul, with
Yes.
consciousness, but
Yes.
that you are a body-mind consciousness, you also, at least I had to distinguish between communication and communion. And the difference is that communion is the direct transmission of any kind of information.
Interesting.
Directly transmitting it without having to move a muscle or change a smile, no language, no talk, no writing, right? You can commune. And the ancient peoples, of course, were doing both communion and communication, what you've just described is the onset of communication, which led to storytelling. Storytelling is something that comes from communication. And in communication, you can deceive each other. In communion, you cannot. Communion is bare naked. Communion is direct information, and it can't be distorted, right?
That's right.
For-
it's
for
like
somebody's
a
purpose.
telepathic. What's that science fiction word? Not like a melding, you know.
Yeah,
No,
mind merging.
mind merging, right?
Yes.
And heart.
And of course, you know,
that
from my experience with the UFO community and stuff, I find it interesting to think of UFOs as being beings in the cosmos far enough advanced so that they have relearned communion after their technological advances or never lost it.
Right.
And so that they can move up and down the keyboard from being visible to us as matter to being invisible to us, because they can slide up into the non-material universe. And everyone I know who's ever been on a spaceship, and the very few people I think I only know one person who was actually taught to drive one, but I've heard of others. And those that learn to drive them all
I knew we had to talk about this. You know?
They all say the same thing, Mitchell. They merged my mind with the flying saucer, with the vehicle I was in, and then I could steer it through wherever I wanted to go. And I'll tell you, the only person I know who did this is Nassim Haramein. And
oh yes, Nassim has been on the show a few times.
repeatedly being out.
Why am I not surprised?
And they would make him forget after these episodes. And he asked them, please, to let him remember one. And that was the last time he ever went out. And he remembered how they merged his mind and how he panicked when he was suddenly the ship and nothing was holding him up. So he, you know, they had to calm him down and make him understand that this was fine and he could now go wherever he wanted to go. And I laughed and I asked Nassim, I said, do you think that's why people see UFOs going every which way in the sky? Is that another human kid learning?
Yeah, right. Pre-driver's license, you know. In Star Wars, we have that phenomenon. I mean, I think they took it from reality, UFO reality, which is, you know, Luke Skywalker being instructed to just feel his way by, you know, through these like tunnel areas and to guide the ship accordingly, that he cannot do something. So here we come back to Taoist science, if you will, not to do something, but rather to intend it and allow it to happen, which is a whole different Weltanschauung, a whole different worldview, of course, to live that way.
Absolutely.
Right? So you were uncovering this as a scientist for all of these decades, Elisabet. And, you know, I'd like to actually go back to, we're beginning to run out of time a little bit here, but
put us on pause for a second.
Oh, sure.
Hello. Okay.
So there's this idea that we have that we are today in the 21st century as Western-oriented, Western-based thinkers and scientists to be the pinnacle of all knowledge, technological advance, and evolution. This is one of those axioms at base in our civilization. Whether we like it or not, whether it's true or not, it's inherently embedded. So I wanted to pose the question, with your vast experience of indigenous science. There we have, I understand, a level of quantum physics and understanding of mathematics that is equal to and beyond what our understanding is today. It has given rise to different types of technologies as well. Going back to the Australian Aboriginal, to ancient Chinese, ancient Tibetan, Vedic, as you mentioned earlier, shamanic, North American native cultures that really have never been given the light of day, but when given, we see that they are actually as, if not, as I said, more advanced. Just take the doggone understanding of Sirius linear B. It was not possible for them to have an understanding and a knowledge based on our worldview as Western thinkers. But indeed they did. And it was actually rather elegant and sophisticated. So if you could just take a moment here and explain, Elisabet, how that operates, how that interfaces with our world perspective as Westerners.
Yes, I mean, I love that you brought that up because, as I say, they had access to both communion and communication, you see.
Yes.
So they could get in from the inside, they could do what we call meditation. You know, I mean, we have to teach ourselves to go inside and to get information that way. But every great scientific discovery, there generally has been admitted to have been downloaded from the inside.
Dreams,
right?
visions.
Dreams, visions,
Delta.
knowing that deep knowingness of how things work. And so, you know, biologically, one of the things that happened with the brain size explosion in the history of humanity as we trace it biologically was that we gave up the knowledge of how to do things to get along in life, the knowledge of how to acquire food and water and mates and divide territory and raise kids and govern ourselves, which other animal species know how to do, was lost in favor of the freedom of choice. And so the great gift and responsibility of human evolution is to make those choices wisely, to make those choices well to all our benefit. Now, over 90%, well over 90% of what we call the history of humanity biologically, we were hunter-gatherers, where we didn't mess nature up beyond spitting pits along our hunting paths so that we'd have extra fruit there or whatever, right? Which was a kind of
planting,
natural, easy agriculture, and discovering roast pig after a forest fire and then doing it yourself, you know, things like that. So, but this communion was given up in Western society, particularly. Not all humans did give it up. And I know of no indigenous culture that gave it up entirely, the ability to commune. So, but these hunter-gatherer societies were extremely egalitarian and extremely stable over long periods of time. At least some of them have survived to this day, you know, in Africa and in Australia. And they had a lot going for them, but deviance was suppressed, more or less. You didn't want, the reason why they dissed the hunter of who killed the biggest animal and said, what a bag of bones you got there, you know, was so that he wouldn't get a fat ego and try to make himself more important than other people.
Yes, interesting.
And so there was a cap on how much ingenuity and individualism could happen in those cultures. Now, to me, the peak indigenous cultures were those in the Andes and in Mexico, some of these high Inca and other Mayan civilizations, and then the Haudenosaunee Indians on the turf of the Hudson River, right? Which is basically Mohawk territory.
Yes.
They were the only ones, to my knowledge, ever to devise a true democracy. And of course, they had it going on the very turf that was taken over by the founding fathers from Europe, who sat on their land thinking up their own constitution. And only one of them really studied the Haudenosaunee Great Law of Peace, and that was Ben Franklin. And so Ben Franklin really got it, that they had kept peace for 1,000 years after making peace among 6 nations, right? That they could hold that peace for a long time. And he brought back all this information. And the only thing the founding fathers adopted for the US Constitution was the tripartite government of checks and balances. You know, this was pretty sophisticated stuff. That they included, but you know what they left out? Women, children, nature, and the future. Trivia? I don't think so.
I've been decrying that omission, Elisabet, for a long time.
So isn't it fascinating that right under our noses, there was an actual democracy that was better than the one that was written by men who wrote it to protect property. And I think more and more people now are really recognizing in this transition time when we're moving out of hostile competition into mature cooperation, that we're recognizing that maybe the first thing that went wrong happened through domesticating plants and animals in agriculture, where land areas became important and ownership came in. And it was allowing each other to claim land ownership that was the beginning of inequities. And did we have to go through that? Maybe we did have to go through this whole 6,000 years now of empire building mode, top-down authority empire building. And we're now in the middle of the last gasp of this empire building, where certain patriarchs are building, trying to develop a true global, what do you call it? Empire, right? A true global empire, while many of us are seeing through that plan and getting, no, there's something about our individuation, our ability to see big pictures individually and to share stories of them and to talk to each other about what is our responsibility, and can we weave this enormous individuation that we've achieved back into a cooperative mode at a global level. That's the real challenge now.
Oh, that is so well put. That is so well put. You know, I so appreciate all that you're saying here in this last section of today's interview. I'm reminded of one of my favorite books of all time, Ishmael, which tells the story from a point of view that none of us is allowed to disclose. It's that secret, that tacit agreement all readers of that book come to, so as not to, give it away, so to speak. But one of the fundamental foundational points is that when man divided up land was the beginning of the end, because it was then that ego, control, power, ownership, as you said, serfdom, turfdom, wars, male-female hierarchy, serfs, slaves, all of it began. Me, you, instead of we, us. All of this emerged out of that space. And we've been paying the dearest price ever since. And it is just the opposite, as I understand, of indigenous wisdom and understanding and approach.
You got it. I mean, that's what it's all about. If we could give up land ownership and warfare, militarization, developing weapons, building weapons, we would free up so much creativity
so much creativity. But we've got to make caring and sharing as exciting as warfare has been. You see, that's very interesting, because you catch young men and adolescents with things that are loud and noisy and move fast to go bang, bang, blow things up.
Testosterone over the top.
You got to do something with that testosterone and channel it. And that's the ancient Greeks were brilliant about confining competition to sports, right? To recognizing that the point of sports is to drive excellence in each other.
Yes.
And so if I could close with a little story from my trip to China in 1973.
Please.
I was taken to a basketball game in China, and it was played exactly the way we play it, so I could follow the game. And so my host stood up and cheered when the first basket was made. I said, oh, okay, now I know, which team to cheer for. But the second basket was made by the other team, and he got up with equal enthusiasm applauding. And this went on, and through the interpreter, I said, which team is yours? And he said, what do you mean? I said, which team do you want to win? He said, how do I know which one will win? And I said, well, don't you have a chosen team? He said, no, why would I? And and then, I got the explanation. And Mao actually wrote an essay on this subject of cooperation and that the point of the sport is to drive excellence. And I actually tried a school to don't say anything to the teams, but coach the parents before the game. Tonight, we're going to cheer excellence. You're going to cheer for everybody who makes a point on both sides. And the team that makes the most points is going to give a party for the other team to thank them for driving them to the extra excellence.
That is
and I said,
beautiful.
What if we did this in our schools?
Oh, God, Elisabet, I love it. I'm a tennis player and a pedal tennis player. It's a sort of an urbanized version of tennis. And I play as often as I can. And I've got to say, there is that attitude that you've just so well described. We go with our full hearts and minds and bodies to win. And we know that we want to play people who are as excellent as possible to sharpen our wits and skill set. And during the game, as well as after the game, we are always acknowledging the beautiful shot or beautiful point the other person on the other team made, as well as our own partner. In other words, it's this cooperative field of, I'm going to say, love and communion, as well as some communication, so you really hit it. That is a beautiful story about the basketball in China. I did not know that, and I'm thrilled to hear it. Well, you and I are going to have to pick this ball up, no pun intended, and run with it because there's so much more to share. And you have just brought so much intelligence and creativity and heartfelt commitment to creating a better world, if you will, to forward, that I just want to acknowledge you for that, and a life committed to positive outcomes for our species and for all species, for that matter, all sentient life. And from my heart, I thank you.
Aho to that.
Aho. And we will continue. I'll have you on again.
Thank you. Aloha.
Aloha. Wow, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Elisabet Sahtouris, evolution biologist, and a lot more, bringing to bear the importance of indigenous cultures, of language, of science, both Western and Vedic and Taoist, to the forefront for us to have a larger, more comprehensive understanding with our minds and our hearts and our bodies of what this game is all about. So thanks so much for joining us. This is Mitchell J. Rabin for a Better World, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.
Aloha from paradise. Hi, Mitch and everyone. Just wanted to take a short time to talk about Elisabet, how she got to Hawaii, and her last days here. So Ronaldo brought her out to a program 12 years ago called the Voyage of Aloha. And Ronaldo's organization, the World Business Academy, was one of the three sponsors, along with the Joseph Campbell Foundation and the Maitreya Institute that I run. So while she was here, she and Ronaldo and I really spent a lot of time together, became close, and called each other brother and sister since then. I think it was about within 6 months to a year that she called me and said she was thinking about moving to Hawaii. She was actually thinking about moving to Maui, but I told her Honolulu would be a much better place. And she did come here, stayed at my house for 6 months, and then found another really nice apartment that she lived in the rest of the time she was here that had a nice ocean view and just a comfortable place for her. So she did get involved in a few wonderful programs here. She started with two other Hawaiian people, a program we started to call Business with Aloha, but the idea was more collaborative business and all the things that Elisabet had learned and taught to her students about a better way of doing business. And that went on for about a year, maybe 3 semesters at a university. And then things changed and it had to be stopped. So there were a number of other things, the programs she was here. She did a lot of speaking online, and she had a wonderful visit just last year to Estonia, I believe, where she had a former admirer. I don't think it was even a student, but an admirer who loved her work, invited her to come out, and she did 2 or 3 weeks of talks out there at age 88. So she was still spreading her magic up until then. And yes, I think both enjoyed Hawaii. It was a little easier for her. She finished her book that many of you may have read, Vista, about her life story. And then, as Mitch says in his announcement of this program, she decided it was time to get her wings. And she told a lot of people that. And she finally told me at the end of October, near the end of October, that she was going to fly away before the end of November. And what she did was go on a silent retreat in her apartment where she didn't eat or drink. And she put up a sign every evening to tell the neighbors that she was still with us. And if the sign wasn't there, they were to call the University of Hawaii, where she had agreed to give her body to the medical school. But after about 10 days, she called me and she said, look, I've spoken with hospice and my medical people. You need to take me to the emergency room, one of our hospitals, and get a diagnosis of a terminal illness, because Hawaii has a law that allows you to assist in a suicide, but only if you have a terminal illness. So we went there, we got the diagnosis. She didn't apply for the formal program. The doctors were very nice to do that for her, and worked out a combination of high blood pressure because she hadn't been eating and the pain that she was feeling. It was the enormous pain from two not very successful hip operations and being told that she was now going to need knee operations that caused her to say, look, I've done my life, I've accomplished a lot, I'm ready to get my wings. So after a day or so in the hospital, the hospice group was able to move her to a senior facility where they again, as the hospital had agreed to not give her any water or food. And within 2 or 3 days, which she mostly slept, she passed comfortably in her sleep. So I'm sure you're all happy to know that last piece. And Elisabet made a lot of good friends in Hawaii. A lot of students really loved her. I loved her, appreciated a lot. We spent a lot of time together. And we had a nice celebration of life here in Hawaii back in December. And I'm so happy that the broader group outside Hawaii is now having this celebration of life and honoring her for the wonderful woman she was. So sorry I can't be there with you, but just want to send my aloha and appreciation for all of the friendship you showed for dear Elisabet and showing up for her celebration of life and really celebrating because that's what she wanted. Thank you very much. Aloha.